Hey guys, tonight we begin with a journey to one of history's most romanticized civilizations. When most people think of ancient Greece, they picture marble columns gleaming white against azure skies, philosophers in flowing togas debating wisdom beneath olive groves, and athletic heroes competing for eternal glory. They imagine democracy being born in Athens, theatre reaching artistic heights in amphitheaters, and mathematical discoveries that would shape human knowledge forever. What a sophisticated, enlightened paradise, right? Well, take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'm curious about something tonight. What time is it where you are right now? Someone last week mentioned they listened to these during their morning commute in Sydney, which honestly wasn't what I expected, but hey, whatever works for you. Before we continue, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. Get comfortable, because where we're going tonight, comfort will be a distant memory. Let's ease into tonight's journey together, because what I'm about to show you will completely shatter every romantic notion you've ever held about ancient Greek civilization. The truth is, if you were somehow transported back to ancient Greece, let's say Athens in 450 BCE, right at the height of the so-called Golden Age, you'd be dead within a month, maybe sooner, and it wouldn't be a heroic death in battle or a philosophical death drinking hemlock. It would be a miserable, mundane death from dysentery, infected wounds, or simply starvation because you have absolutely no idea how to survive in a world where a single mistake can kill you. Here's what really happened in ancient Athens while philosophers debated the nature of justice. Children died regularly from diseases that would be cured with a simple prescription today. Women endured childbirth without anesthesia, antibiotics, or even basic sanitation, leading to mortality rates that would horrify modern medical professionals. Men worked in conditions so dangerous that reaching age 40 was considered remarkable longevity. The average life expectancy wasn't the comfortable 70-plus years you're accustomed to. It was somewhere between 25 and 35 years, and that's only if you survived childhood, which roughly one-third of children didn't. The infant mortality rate was so high that parents often waited years before naming children, knowing that attachment to doomed infants caused unnecessary emotional suffering. The beautiful white marble buildings you imagine, they were painted in garish colours that would look like ancient theme parks to modern eyes. The noble philosophers, most were wealthy slave owners whose deep thoughts were subsidised by human misery. The democratic ideals, they applied to maybe 10% of the population, while everyone else lived in various forms of bondage. Tonight, we're going to drop you into ancient Athens and see exactly how long you'd last. We'll follow your day-by-day struggle for survival in a world where clean water is a luxury, where medical treatment kills more people than it saves, where violence is the primary method of conflict resolution, and where social hierarchies determine who lives and who dies with brutal efficiency. Spoiler alert, it's not going to go well. Your modern body is too soft, your modern mind is too individualistic, and your modern skills are completely useless for ancient survival requirements. But the journey of understanding why you'd fail so spectacularly will teach you something profound about both ancient achievement and modern privilege. So settle in, because we're about to discover together that the ancient world, for all its genuine accomplishments in philosophy, art and political theory, was no place for people like you, and honestly that's probably the greatest testament to human progress you could ask for. Chapter 1. Welcome to your new nightmare. You wake up on a dirt floor and immediately your modern sensibilities are under assault. This isn't the romantic awakening scene from historical movies, where soft morning light filters through scenic windows onto comfortable beds. This is brutal reality. Hard-packed earth mixed with straw that's been compressed by countless bodies, already leaving painful impressions on your soft modern flesh. The smell hits you next. A combination of human sweat, urine, rotting food scraps, smoke from poorly ventilated fires, and something else you can't quite identify but that makes your modern stomach lurch violently. This is the baseline smell of ancient human habitation, so common that everyone else in the room seems completely unbothered by air quality, that would trigger modern health and safety violations. Your eyes water immediately, not from emotion, but from the acrid smoke that fills the small windowless room. There's no proper ventilation system, just a hole in the roof that provides minimal escape for the smoke from last night's cooking fire. The Romans hadn't yet brought their engineering expertise to Greece, and even then, such luxuries would be reserved for the wealthy. For ordinary people like you've become, breathing smoke isn't a temporary inconvenience. It's a permanent condition that slowly destroys lung tissue over years. The room itself would claustrophobia-inducing by modern standards. About 10 feet by 12 feet, with mud brick walls that are cracking in several places. The ceiling is low enough that taller people would need to duck, and it's made of wooden beams covered with clay tiles that leak during rain. There are no windows because glass doesn't exist for ordinary people, and open holes would let in cold air, insects, and potential intruders. 6 other people share this tiny space with you, a family of 5 plus one other worker like yourself. Privacy, as modern humans understand it, simply doesn't exist. Every bodily function, every personal moment, every intimate conversation happens in the presence of others. The psychological adjustment required for this communal living would be traumatic for most contemporary people who consider private space a basic human need. You try to sit up, and that's when you discover the full extent of your physical deterioration from just one night on ancient sleeping arrangements. Your back aches in ways you've never experienced, not the mild stiffness from a poor mattress, but genuine pain from sleeping on surfaces that provide no support for human anatomy. Your hips feel bruised from contact with the hard floor. Your neck has a crick that sends shooting pains down your shoulder. Modern humans sleep on mattresses designed by orthopedic specialists with materials engineered for support and comfort. Memory foam, pocket springs, adjustable firmness, these aren't luxuries. They're technologies developed through centuries of understanding about human physiology and sleep requirements. Ancient Greeks sleep on whatever soft materials they can gather. Straw if they're fortunate, animal hides if they're prosperous, nothing but dirt if they're desperate. Your clothes present another immediate shock to your modern sensibilities. Gone are your comfortable cotton blends, your precisely fitted garments, your underwear designed for support and moisture wicking. Instead, you're wearing a rough woolen tunic that feels like sandpaper against skin that's accustomed to modern textiles. It's not just uncomfortable, it's genuinely painful, scratching with every movement and creating irritation that will only worsen throughout the day. The wool itself comes from sheep that graze on whatever vegetation they can find, producing fibre that's coarse, inconsistently textured, and often contaminated with plant matter and parasites. It's woven on primitive looms by people who learned the craft through necessity rather than precision, creating fabric that's functional but far from comfortable. Modern textile manufacturing, with its quality controls and specialized materials, produces clothing so superior to ancient alternatives that the difference is almost incomprehensible. Your feet are wrapped in leather strips that provide about as much protection as paper bags would against modern terrain. The leather comes from local animals, tanned using processes that involve urine, animal brains and other substances that would horrify contemporary leather workers. It's not waterproof, it's not insulated, and it's not designed for the kind of walking that ancient life requires. "Get up, you lazy dog," growls a voice from the doorway, speaking in rapid Greek that your academic training barely helps you understand. Meet Chrysos, your new employer, and the man whose goodwill determines whether you live or die in ancient Athens. He's a potter, which in your modern imagination probably sounds quaint and artistic. A peaceful craftsman creating beautiful objects in a serene workshop setting. The reality is brutally different. Chrysos is a man whose hands are permanently stained with clay, and whose lungs are being slowly destroyed by ceramic dust that he breathes every day. His chronic cough isn't a cold. It's occupational disease that will eventually kill him, probably before he reaches 50. His bent posture isn't just from age, it's from years of bending over potter's wheels and lifting heavy clay materials without ergonomic considerations. He's also your only hope for survival in ancient Athens, because the economic realities of ancient life are simple. If you don't work, you don't eat, and if you don't eat, you die. There are no unemployment benefits, no social safety nets, no charitable organizations dedicated to helping displaced persons. Individual survival depends entirely on individual productivity, and your productivity depends entirely on Chrysos' continued willingness to employ you. Chrysos isn't being particularly cruel when he calls you lazy. He's being practical. Dawn is breaking over Athens, and in a world without artificial lighting, every moment of natural light is precious for productive work. While you are sleeping like a modern person accustomed to 8 hours of rest on comfortable surfaces, everyone else in the household has been awake for an hour, preparing for a day of physical labour that would exhaust a modern athlete. Ancient Greeks typically wake before sunrise and work until sunset, with brief breaks during the hottest part of the day when physical labour becomes dangerous. There are no weekends, no vacation time, no personal days for rest and recovery. Work happens every day except for religious festivals, and even then, religious observances often involve physical labour in the form of processions, sacrifices, and feast preparations. You stumble to your feet and immediately notice something that will become your constant companion: hunger. Not the mild hunger of someone who skipped breakfast, but the gnawing, stomach-cramping hunger of someone whose last meal was a few scraps of bread and watered wine yesterday evening. This isn't a dietary choice or an intermittent fasting experiment. This is just how ancient life works for ordinary people. Food is scarce, expensive, and often contaminated with substances that would make modern food safety inspectors faint. People eat when they can, what they can, and they're grateful for whatever nutrition they can obtain. The 3 meals a day pattern that modern humans consider normal is a luxury that most ancient Greeks can't afford. 2 small meals per day is more typical, with the larger meal coming in the evening after work is completed. The other people in the room are already moving with practiced efficiency that highlights your complete incompetence at ancient survival tasks. There's Melania, Chrysos' wife, who's grinding barley on a stone quern that looks like it belongs in a museum. The sound is rhythmic but harsh. Stone grinding against stone, producing the coarse flour that will become today's bread. The grinding process requires upper body strength that modern humans rarely develop, plus technical knowledge about grain preparation that takes years to master. The flour produced is nothing like modern refined products. It's coarse, often contaminated with stone particles from the grinding process, and frequently includes insects, rodents' droppings, and other materials that got mixed with the grain during storage. Your soft, modern hands would be bleeding within minutes of operating that grinding equipment. Melania's hands, calloused from years of food preparation, can handle the rough stone surfaces and repetitive motions without injury. She learned these skills as a child and has been perfecting them for decades, developing muscle memory and physical adaptations that you'll never achieve. There's also Nikeas, Chrysos' teenage son, who's carefully banking the fire that provides the household's only source of heat and cooking capability. Fire management is a crucial survival skill in the ancient world. Flames must be kept alive continuously, because starting new fires is difficult, time-consuming, and expensive in terms of materials required. In your modern world, you flip switches or turn dials to control heating and cooking. Here, fire is a precious resource that requires constant attention and technical knowledge. Nikeas understands fuel types, burning patterns, heat management, and safety considerations that prevent household fires from spreading to neighbouring buildings. You, with your modern dependence on central heating and gas stoves, would probably burn the house down within hours if left in charge of fire management. And then there's Xanthi, a slave girl who's about 12 years old and already more competent at basic survival tasks than you'll ever be. She's preparing water for the day, which involves hauling heavy ceramic jars from the neighbourhood well, jars that weigh more when full than most modern people can comfortably carry. The water itself looks questionable by modern standards, slightly cloudy, with a metallic taste that suggests contamination from the lead pipes and ceramic storage vessels used in ancient water systems. But it's all there is. No filtration systems, no chlorination, no quality testing, no government agencies monitoring water safety. You drink what's available, or you dehydrate. Xanthi has been carrying water since she was old enough to lift the smaller containers, developing the upper body strength and balance required for this daily necessity. Her small arms show defined muscles from years of hauling weights that would challenge modern adults. She knows which wells have the cleanest water, which times of day offer the best supply, and which containers hold water freshest for longest periods. "Move faster," Chrysos barks, and you realise you've been standing there gawking like a tourist while everyone else works. This isn't a historical reenactment where you can observe from a comfortable distance. This is survival, and every moment you waste in confusion and amazement is a moment closer to starvation. You follow Chrysos outside, and the assault on your senses intensifies immediately. The smell of ancient Athens hits you like a physical blow. A combination of human waste, rotting garbage, unwashed bodies, cooking fires, and animals that's so overwhelming your modern digestive system rebels instantly. You fight the urge to vomit, but your eyes water and your throat constricts. This isn't just one bad smell. It's the baseline odour of a city where 200,000 people live without sewage systems, garbage collection, or any concept of public sanitation as modern humans understand it. Human and animal waste accumulates in streets and empty spaces. Garbage is thrown out of windows and left to rot where it falls. Dead animals are left where they die until scavengers remove them or weather breaks them down. The streets themselves present navigation challenges that would perplex modern urban dwellers. They're narrow, maybe 6 to 8 feet wide between buildings, unpaved, and filled with obstacles that require constant attention. Human and animal waste creates slippery, hazardous surfaces. Discarded pottery sherds can cut through thin leather footwear. Puddles of water from various sources hide dangerous holes or debris that could cause injuries. Ancient cities weren't planned by urban designers with considerations for traffic flow, public safety, or pedestrian comfort. Streets evolved organically as pathways between buildings, without standardization, signage, or maintenance. Navigation requires local knowledge that takes years to develop, and getting lost in your own neighborhood is a real possibility for newcomers. One wrong step could mean a twisted ankle, and in a world without proper medical care, a twisted ankle can become a life-threatening condition. Injuries that heal easily with modern treatment, broken bones, torn ligaments, infected wounds, can lead to permanent disability or death in ancient contexts where medical intervention is primitive and often harmful. As you walk, you notice the other people on the streets, and their physical appearance provides shocking evidence of how different ancient life is from modern existence. Everyone looks smaller than contemporary humans, not just shorter, but genuinely smaller in frame and muscle mass. This isn't genetic variation. It's the result of malnutrition that affects physical development from birth. The people around you have been malnourished their entire lives, not from famine, but from normal ancient dietary limitations. What modern humans consider normal human size is actually the result of abundant calories, complete proteins, vitamins, and minerals that simply don't exist in ancient diets for ordinary people. Ancient Greeks eat primarily grain-based foods, with occasional supplements of olive oil, wine, and small amounts of protein from cheese, fish, or meat. Many people have visible health problems that would be easily treatable in your time but represent permanent disabilities here. Skin conditions from poor nutrition and hygiene, dental problems from coarse food and no dental care, limps from poorly healed injuries, chronic coughs from breathing polluted air without any respiratory treatment. A man walks by with what's clearly a cataract clouding one eye, rendering him half blind. In your world, this would be corrected with a simple outpatient surgery. Here, it's progressive blindness that will eventually eliminate his ability to work, and probably lead to his death from inability to support himself economically. A woman carries a child with obvious signs of rickets, bowed legs, enlarged skull, delayed development from vitamin D deficiency. Modern humans get vitamin D from fortified foods and supplements, plus medical treatment if deficiencies develop. Ancient children get rickets from insufficient nutrition and lack of sunlight exposure, and the skeletal deformities become permanent disabilities that affect their entire lives. Keep up, Chrysos snaps, because you've fallen behind while staring at the medieval horror movie playing out around you. Your modern fitness level, conditioned for air-conditioned gyms and ergonomic workstations, is already struggling with basic walking on uneven terrain while carrying unfamiliar weights. Modern exercise routines prepare people for controlled, short-duration activities with specific muscle groups. Ancient life requires sustained physical activity, using your entire body in ways that modern humans rarely experience. Walking on uneven surfaces engages stabilizing muscles that gym workouts don't address. Carrying irregular loads requires core strength and balance that specialized fitness equipment can't develop. You arrive at Chrysos' pottery workshop, which is attached to his house, in a building arrangement that would violate modern zoning laws, but is normal for ancient mixed-use urban development. The workspace is dim, lit only by the doorway, and a few oil lamps that produce more smoke than illumination. Modern humans are accustomed to consistent bright lighting that makes detailed work possible at any time. Ancient craftsmen work by whatever light is available and adjust their activities according to natural illumination patterns. The floor is packed earth, not concrete, not tile, not any kind of finished flooring that modern building codes would require. Packed earth is cheap and functional, but it creates dust, harbours insects and rodents, and becomes muddy during rain. The walls are mud brick that's already showing cracks from settling and weather exposure. The ceiling is low enough that you have to duck in places, made from wooden beams that support clay tiles providing minimal weather protection. This isn't a charming artisanal studio like modern pottery workshops. It's a primitive workspace where skilled labour barely keeps a family from starvation. The romance of traditional craftsmanship disappears when you understand the physical demands, economic pressures, and health hazards that ancient craftsmen accept as normal working conditions. Chrysos shows you to a pile of clay that needs to be prepared for the potter's wheel. This involves kneading out air bubbles, adding the right amount of water, and achieving proper consistency through purely physical manipulation. No mechanical mixers, no precise measurements, no quality control beyond personal experience and judgment. The clay itself is heavy, much heavier than you expected. It's also sticky in ways that make handling difficult for inexperienced workers. Your modern hands, soft from a lifetime of keyboard typing and touchscreen interaction, develop painful blisters within the first hour. The clay's alkaline properties cause chemical irritation that creates burning sensations on your skin, and the repetitive kneading motions strain your wrists, forearms, and shoulders in ways that modern ergonomic design specifically tries to prevent. This is just the preparation work. You haven't even begun learning actual pottery skills. Ancient pottery requires years of training to develop the hand-eye coordination, muscle memory, and technical knowledge necessary for producing functional ceramics. The potter's wheel demands core strength, balance, and fine motor control that takes months or years to develop. Pathetic, mutters Nicias, watching your clumsy efforts with the bemused contempt of someone who's been doing this work since childhood. He's right. Your fine motor skills, developed through years of using precision instruments like pens and computer controls, are useless for clay manipulation that requires different kinds of coordination entirely. Your gross motor skills, weakened by a lifetime of sitting at desks and riding in vehicles, can barely handle the basic physical labour that pottery work requires. You're essentially a helpless infant in a world that requires immediate competence for survival, and your incompetence is obvious to everyone watching. As the morning progresses, you begin to understand the relentless nature of ancient work patterns. There are no coffee breaks, no lunch hours scheduled around convenience rather than necessity, no ergonomic considerations to prevent injury, no safety regulations to protect workers from hazardous conditions. You work until the task is complete, or until your body gives out, whichever comes first. The tasks themselves are never really complete. There's always more clay to prepare, more pots to shape, more glazes to mix, more fires to tend. Ancient economic survival requires continuous productivity without the scheduled rest periods that modern labour management recognises as essential for worker health and efficiency. By midday, you're exhausted in ways that modern humans rarely experience. It's not the pleasant tiredness from a good workout or the manageable fatigue from a busy day at work. It's bone-deep exhaustion that comes from physical demands that exceed your body's capacity for adaptation. Your hands are blistered and cracked, your back aches with muscle spasms, and clay dust has gotten into your hair, under your fingernails, and somehow inside your clothes despite your efforts to stay clean. The clay dust is particularly problematic because it contains silica particles that are slowly destroying your lung tissue. This isn't dramatic acute poisoning, it's gradual occupational disease that will cause respiratory problems over years or decades. Pottery workers in ancient Greece typically develop severe breathing difficulties by middle age, and many die from lung diseases related to dust inhalation. Chrysos' chronic cough isn't a temporary illness, it's progressive occupational disease that represents the price of his economic survival. Ancient workers accept these health consequences because they have no choice. Modern occupational safety regulations, worker compensation systems, and alternative employment opportunities don't exist for ancient Greeks who must choose between dangerous work and starvation. The midday meal provides your first real exposure to ancient food quality and preparation methods. It's served on wooden boards that have never been properly sanitized according to modern food safety standards. There's no concept of germ theory, so food preparation happens with the same hands that handle clay, tend animals, and manage waste materials. Cross-contamination isn't just likely, it's inevitable. The food itself would shock modern palates accustomed to processed foods designed for consistent flavour, texture, and safety. The bread is made from coarsely ground barley flour that's difficult to chew and nearly impossible to digest for stomachs accustomed to refined grains. It's dense, chewy, and often contaminated with grit from the stone grinding process. A few olives provide fat and salt, but they're intensely briny from preservation processes that use salt as the primary method for preventing spoilage. Modern olives are processed to remove excessive saltiness and provide consistent flavour. Ancient olives are preserved using whatever methods prevent immediate spoilage, regardless of taste considerations. The cheese comes from goats that eat whatever vegetation they can find, including plants that would be considered weeds or even toxic by modern agricultural standards. The flavour is sharp, sometimes rancid, and varies dramatically based on seasonal dietary changes in the animals producing the milk. Modern dairy products come from cattle-fed controlled diets and processed under sanitary conditions that produce consistent, safe products. And then there's the wine. Ancient Greek wine isn't the sophisticated product you know from modern vineyards. It's a rough, acidic liquid that's usually mixed with water, because drinking it straight would burn your throat and potentially cause alcohol poisoning. It's also frequently contaminated with lead from the ceramic vessels used in production and storage, slowly poisoning everyone who drinks it regularly. The wine serves multiple purposes beyond recreation. It's a source of calories, a mild antiseptic for contaminated water, and a social lubricant that makes difficult living conditions more bearable. But it's also a drug that people use to cope with physical pain, emotional stress, and existential despair that come from lives of constant hardship without relief prospects. As you struggle to consume this meal, because you need the calories for survival, even if the food is barely edible by modern standards, you overhear a conversation between Chrysos and a neighbouring craftsman that provides insight into the mortality patterns that shape ancient life. 3 more families on Hermes Street have shown the signs, the neighbour says quietly. The fever that turns skin yellow, the black vomit, the madness before death. Children first, then the women, then the men who tried to nurse them. The gods are angry about something, Chrysos replies, making a religious gesture that's supposed to ward off divine displeasure. The priests say more sacrifices are needed, larger offerings to appease whatever power we've offended. You realise they're describing what's probably hepatitis, typhus, or another disease that would be easily treatable in your time but represents a death sentence here. And they're explaining it through supernatural frameworks because they have no understanding of microbiology, epidemiology, or evidence-based medicine. When people start dying in large numbers, the response isn't scientific investigation to identify causes and develop treatments. It's increased religious activity designed to appease supernatural forces believed to control disease through divine intervention. This religious response provides psychological comfort and community solidarity, but it doesn't address actual disease mechanisms or prevent future outbreaks. The conversation continues with practical discussions about quarantine measures, not based on understanding of disease transmission, but on empirical observations that contact with sick people seems to spread illness. Ancient Greeks develop effective isolation practices without understanding why they work, creating public health measures based on trial and error rather than scientific methodology. Avoid the water near the tannery, the neighbour advises. Something about the leather preparation poisons the wells. My cousin's family drank from there and all died within days. First the children, then the adults, same pattern every time. This observation is actually scientifically accurate. Leather tanning processes involve toxic chemicals that contaminate water supplies and cause the kinds of symptoms they're describing. But without understanding of industrial pollution or chemical contamination, people interpret these patterns through supernatural explanations that prevent systematic solutions. The afternoon brings no relief from physical demands. You're assigned to help prepare pottery for firing in the kiln, which involves maintaining precise temperatures through constant adjustment of fuel and airflow. The work is hot, dangerous, and requires skills developed over years of practice. The kiln itself is a primitive structure that reaches temperatures capable of causing severe burns, with no safety equipment beyond basic common sense and whatever protective measures individual workers develop. Modern industrial safety would require protective clothing, ventilation systems, emergency procedures, and safety monitoring. Ancient pottery workers simply accept burn risks as occupational hazards that come with economic survival. As you work, sweat pouring down your face and mixing with the ever-present clay dust, you begin to understand something fundamental about ancient life that modern humans have forgotten. There is no margin for error. Every decision, every action, every moment of inattention can result in injury, illness, economic loss, or death. Modern humans live in environments designed for safety, with redundant systems, warning labels, safety nets, and emergency services. Ancient Greeks live in a world where individual mistakes have immediate, severe consequences without institutional support or technological backup systems. The pottery you're helping to prepare isn't art for art's sake. Every vessel represents economic survival for Chrysos' household. A batch of ruined pottery means less money for food, less ability to purchase raw materials for future production, less capacity to pay taxes or religious obligations that keep the family in good standing with community authorities. Failure isn't just professionally disappointing, it's potentially fatal for everyone who depends on workshop productivity for their survival. The economic pressure created by this reality shapes every aspect of ancient work life, creating stress levels that modern humans rarely experience outside of crisis situations. As evening approaches and natural light begins to fade, you realize that your workday isn't ending. It's just transitioning to different forms of labor. Ancient households don't separate work and personal life the way modern families do. Evening activities involve essential maintenance tasks that keep living spaces marginally habitable and prepare for tomorrow's productive activities. This includes sweeping dirt floors with handmade brooms that just redistribute dirt rather than removing it, patching holes in mud brick walls with clay and straw mixtures that provide temporary weather protection, and organizing tools and materials for tomorrow's work in storage systems that rely on memory rather than written organization. Modern humans would consider these activities janitorial work, either temporary jobs for teenagers or specialized services hired occasionally. Ancient Greeks consider them essential daily activities that prevent immediate deterioration of living conditions and maintain the basic infrastructure that supports survival. The evening meal is similar to the midday meal but with smaller portions, because food resources are carefully rationed to last through winter months, when fresh supplies become unavailable and preserved foods must sustain the household. There's always uncertainty about future food security based on weather patterns, political stability, trade disruptions, and economic fluctuations that can eliminate food access without warning. The concept of food abundance that modern humans take for granted simply doesn't exist for ancient Greeks, who plan every meal around scarcity management and resource conservation. Eating until you're satisfied is a luxury that most people can't afford most of the time. After the meal, the household gathers around the small fire for what passes as entertainment in a world without television, books, recorded music, or any of the diversions that modern humans use to occupy leisure time. Conversation, storytelling, and basic craft work fill the evening hours, but even this leisure time involves productive activities that contribute to household economic survival. Melania spins wool into thread using a drop spindle, a process that requires constant attention and creates materials essential for clothing production. Nikias repairs tools and equipment that will be needed for tomorrow's work. Even you are expected to contribute something useful to these evening activities, sorting clay materials, preparing kindling for tomorrow's fires, or helping with basic maintenance tasks. The entertainment value of these activities is secondary to their practical importance. Ancient households can't afford purely recreational time when survival requires constant productive effort. Modern concepts of leisure, hobbies, and personal time represent luxuries that subsistence-level societies simply cannot support. As darkness falls completely, the temperature drops rapidly, and you discover that ancient Greek architecture provides minimal protection against weather changes. There's no insulation in the walls, no weather stripping around openings, no central heating system to maintain comfortable temperatures throughout the night. The small fire provides some warmth, but only within immediate proximity to the flames. Heat distribution is uneven and inefficient, creating temperature gradients that leave some parts of the room uncomfortably cold, while others are too warm. Managing sleeping arrangements around these temperature variations becomes a nightly challenge that affects sleep quality and personal comfort. You'll spend the night cold, uncomfortable, and probably hungry despite the evening meal. The same dirt floor where you started serves as your bed, surrounded by the same smoke-filled air that irritated your lungs all day, wearing the same scratchy woolen tunic that now also smells like clay, sweat, and kiln smoke. Before drifting off to fitful sleep, you hear sounds from outside that remind you this city never truly rests despite the absence of artificial lighting. Dogs barking at unknown disturbances, people calling to each other for reasons you can't understand, occasional arguments or celebrations from neighbouring households that carry through thin walls and open spaces. And underneath it all, a sound that will haunt your dreams and follow you through your ancient existence. Someone nearby weeping for a loss you can't identify, but that represents the constant presence of death in ancient life. Someone has died today, from disease, accident, violence, or simply the accumulated stresses of survival in a world without modern medical care or safety systems. You've survived your first day in ancient Greece, but barely. Your body aches in ways you've never experienced. Your hands are blistered and cracked from unfamiliar labour. Your lungs burn from smoke and dust inhalation. And you're hungry despite eating 2 meals that provided minimal nutrition by modern standards. Tomorrow will bring the same challenges, but with the added difficulty that your body's already damaged by today's labours. Each day will be slightly harder than the last as accumulated stress, injury and malnutrition gradually wear down your physical capabilities. This is the reality of ancient survival. Not dramatic crisis that kills quickly, but slow attrition that gradually eliminates people who can't maintain the constant effort required for subsistence living. And this was an easy day. No medical emergencies, no accidents, no violence, no natural disasters, no military conflicts. Just normal, everyday survival in one of history's most celebrated civilizations. If this is what the good days look like, you're starting to realize that your romantic notions about ancient Greece weren't just wrong. They were dangerously delusional fantasies that bear no relationship to historical reality. The darkness that finally claims your consciousness isn't the peaceful sleep of modern bedtime routines. It's the exhausted collapse of a body pushed beyond its limits by demands that will only increase as your ancient survival continues. And tomorrow, assuming you wake up at all, will be worse. Chapter 2. The water will kill you slowly, then quickly. You wake up with a thirst so intense it feels like someone has filled your mouth with sand and your throat with broken glass. This isn't the mild thirst of modern dehydration that sends you to a kitchen tap for instant relief. This is the desperate, panic-inducing thirst of a body that's been pushed to its limits by physical labour in Mediterranean heat, while consuming water that your modern digestive system can barely process. Your tongue feels swollen and rough against your teeth. Your lips are already cracking from dehydration. Your head pounds with the kind of headache that would send modern people straight to emergency rooms. But here it's just Tuesday morning in ancient Athens. Water scarcity isn't a crisis. It's a permanent condition that shapes every aspect of daily life and kills people regularly through dehydration, contamination, or the diseases that thrive in unsanitary water systems. Xanthi is already at the neighbourhood well with the dawn light, hauling water in heavy ceramic amphorae that weigh about 15 pounds empty and nearly 60 pounds when full. She makes this look effortless because she's been doing it since she could walk, but when you try to help, you nearly drop the container and ruin a day's water supply for the entire household. The physical demands of water collection would challenge modern athletes. The containers are awkwardly shaped, with narrow necks and wide bodies that make them difficult to grip securely. The weight distribution changes as water sloshes during transport, requiring constant balance adjustments that engage core muscles and stabilizers that modern gym workouts don't develop. Ancient Greeks typically make 3 or 4 trips to water sources each day, carrying loads that exceed modern ergonomic recommendations for safe lifting. The cumulative effect is early arthritis, back problems, and repetitive stress injuries that become permanent disabilities. But the alternative to water hauling is death from dehydration, so people accept these health consequences as normal costs of survival. The well itself would horrify modern health inspectors and probably violate dozens of contemporary safety regulations. It's an open pit about 40 feet deep, lined with stones that are cracked and crumbling. The rope and bucket system has been used by hundreds of people with unwashed hands, creating a contamination pathway that spreads disease throughout the community. Surface runoff from streets carries human waste, animal excrement, rotting garbage, and industrial pollutants directly into the well during rainstorms. The water collected in this bucket has been sitting in ceramic vessels that are never properly sterilized, stored in areas where rodents and insects have constant access, and handled by people whose understanding of hygiene extends only to basic cleanliness, for social acceptability rather than disease prevention. Dead animals occasionally fall into wells and decompose before anyone notices, contaminating the entire water supply with bacterial toxins that cause severe illness or death. Children playing near wells sometimes defecate in the immediate area, and their waste seeps into the groundwater through permeable soil. Adults use well areas for urination when other facilities aren't convenient, adding constant bacterial contamination to water sources. The ceramic storage containers used for water transport and household storage harbour bacteria in their porous surfaces even when they appear clean. Ancient cleaning methods, rinsing with the same contaminated water, scrubbing with sand or ash, wiping with cloth that's never properly sanitised, don't eliminate bacterial contamination that modern sanitation systems address through chemical treatment and high-temperature sterilisation. Don't drink too much at once, Xanthi warns as you reach desperately for the water dipper, your modern body craving hydration that could literally kill you. Make yourself sick. Stranger water always does. She's right. Your modern digestive system, accustomed to treated water with controlled bacterial content, can't handle the microbial assault of ancient water supplies. Modern municipal water treatment removes or kills bacteria, viruses, parasites, and chemical contaminants that make ancient water sources dangerous. Chlorination, filtration, pH adjustment, and quality monitoring ensure that water from modern taps is safe for immediate consumption. Ancient water contains all of these hazardous elements in concentrations that would shut down modern water systems immediately. Drinking too quickly triggers violent diarrhea as your intestines try to expel water that contains bacteria, parasites, and toxins. The resulting dehydration can be worse than the original thirst, creating cycles of fluid loss that can kill through electrolyte imbalance and cardiovascular collapse. Ancient Greeks learned to sip contaminated water slowly, allowing their adapted digestive systems to process small amounts of contamination without triggering severe reactions. As you carefully sip the metallic-tasting water, trying not to think about what microscopic organisms might be swimming in it, you overhear conversations from other women at the well that reveal the deadly reality of water-related mortality in ancient Athens. Little Marcus died in the night, one woman reports, with a matter-of-fact tone that ancient people use for discussing death, not because they don't care, but because emotional displays of grief interfere with survival activities that can't be postponed. 3 days of fever after drinking from the fountain near the tannery. Started with stomach cramps, then the bloody flux, then delirium. His mother tried everything, prayers, herbs, bloodletting, but nothing helped. That's the 4th child this month from that fountain, another woman replies, her voice carrying practical concern rather than emotional distress. The water spirits there have turned malevolent. Maybe someone violated the ritual purification requirements, or strangers have contaminated the sacred space with foreign pollution. What they're describing as angry water spirits are probably cholera, dysentery, typhoid, or other waterborne diseases that would be easily preventable in your time, but represent death sentences here. The fountain near the tannery is particularly dangerous because leather processing involves chemicals, urine, animal brains, plant extracts, lime, that create toxic runoff contaminating local water sources. Ancient tanning processes produce waste that includes heavy metals, organic acids, and bacterial toxins that poison groundwater for considerable distances around processing sites. Modern industrial waste management and environmental protection regulations prevent this kind of contamination, but ancient industries discharge waste wherever convenient without consideration for downstream users. These women understand empirically that certain water sources cause illness and death, but they explain causation through supernatural frameworks that prevent systematic solutions. Instead of investigating contamination sources or developing treatment methods, communities respond to water-related deaths through increased religious observances designed to appease divine powers believed to control water quality. The priests say we need larger offerings to the nymphs, a third woman suggests, more expensive sacrifices, community-wide purification rituals. Maybe that will clean the water and stop the children from dying. This religious response provides psychological comfort and social cohesion during health crises, but it doesn't address actual contamination sources or prevent future outbreaks. Ancient Greeks develop elaborate theological explanations for water-related mortality that make suffering meaningful within their worldview, while preventing the empirical investigation that could lead to genuine solutions. The economic burden of religious responses to water contamination adds another layer of hardship to families already struggling with survival. Sacrificial animals cost money that might otherwise buy food or fuel. Religious ceremonies require time that could be spent on productive activities. Purification rituals demand materials and resources that strain household budgets beyond their limits. As you help carry water back to Chrysos' house, the 40-pound amphorae straining your modern muscles beyond their capacity, you observe other people making water-related decisions that would seem insane by contemporary standards, but represent rational responses to impossible choices. A man fills his drinking vessel directly from a puddle in the street, choosing immediate hydration over long-term health consequences, because dehydration will kill him today, while water contamination might kill him eventually. A woman washes vegetables in water that's visibly contaminated with sewage, because dirty vegetables are inedible, while clean vegetables washed in contaminated water provide nutrition despite health risks. Children play in streams that are obviously polluted with industrial waste from metalworking shops, textile producers, and food processing operations because playing in contaminated water is better than not playing at all, and childhood joy matters even in survival contexts. Parents allow this dangerous play because preventing it would require constant supervision that interferes with productive work necessary for family survival. These aren't choices made through ignorance or stupidity. They're desperate calculations about competing risks in circumstances where all available options carry dangers. When every water source is contaminated to some degree, people choose the least contaminated sources they can access, rather than avoiding water entirely and dying from dehydration. Back at Chrysos' household, Melania demonstrates the ancient water management techniques that allow survival under these impossible conditions. Her methods represent generations of accumulated knowledge about water treatment that works partially without understanding why it works. She boils water in ceramic pots over the fire, not because she understands that high temperatures kill bacteria, but because empirical observation has shown that heated water causes less illness than cold water. The boiling process does eliminate some pathogens, though it doesn't address chemical contamination, heavy metals, or heat-resistant microorganisms that require more sophisticated treatment. She adds wine to drinking water in ratios that provide some antimicrobial benefits from alcohol content, though the wine itself may contain lead contamination from ceramic storage vessels and processing equipment. The alcohol helps kill some bacteria while potentially introducing other toxins that cause different health problems. She stores water in specific ceramic vessels that experience has shown keep water fresh longer, not understanding that certain clay compositions and glazing techniques create surfaces less hospitable to bacterial growth. These storage methods work better than alternatives available to her, but they're still far inferior to modern water storage systems. Water allocation within the household follows strict hierarchies based on survival priorities and social status. The cleanest water goes to Chrysos as the primary economic producer, whose health directly affects family survival prospects. Melania gets the next cleanest water as the household manager, whose illness would disrupt essential domestic activities. Children receive water of moderate quality because their developing immune systems can sometimes adapt to contamination levels that would kill adults, though child mortality from water-related diseases remains extremely high. Slaves and workers like yourself get whatever water remains after family members' needs are met, regardless of quality or safety. This hierarchical water distribution isn't cruel. It's mathematical survival management in circumstances where clean water is genuinely scarce, and family survival requires prioritizing the most economically valuable members. Modern humanitarian principles about equal access to clean water represent luxury thinking that subsistence societies cannot afford. During your morning pottery work, you witness a water-related health emergency that illustrates how quickly contaminated water can kill even healthy adults. Theron, a neighbouring craftsman in his 30s, becomes violently ill after drinking from a public fountain that seemed clean but apparently contained bacterial contamination. The progression of his illness follows patterns that would be textbook examples for modern medical students studying waterborne diseases. Initial gastrointestinal symptoms, nausea, cramping, diarrhea, escalate rapidly to systemic infection as bacteria enter his bloodstream through damaged intestinal tissue. Fever develops as his immune system attempts to fight bacterial invasion. Dehydration accelerates as diarrhea and vomiting eliminate more fluids than he can replace through drinking contaminated water that worsens his condition. Confusion and delirium begin as dehydration affects brain function, and bacterial toxins interfere with nervous system operations. His family gathers around with remedies that range from ineffective to actively harmful, based on ancient medical theories that bear no relationship to actual disease processes. They force him to drink more water to replace lost fluids, not understanding that his illness is water-related and that additional contaminated water will worsen his condition. They administer herbal preparations that might provide minimal symptomatic relief, but can't address bacterial infections that require antibiotic treatment unavailable for thousands of years. They perform religious rituals designed to appease whatever supernatural forces they believe are causing his illness, diverting attention from practical care that might improve his comfort. What they don't do is anything that would actually help according to modern medical understanding. They don't identify and eliminate the contamination source. They don't provide sterile fluid replacement therapy. They don't isolate him to prevent disease transmission to other family members, and they don't seek medical interventions that could address bacterial infections. Modern emergency medicine would treat Theron's condition with intravenous antibiotics to eliminate bacterial infection, sterile saline solutions to correct dehydration and electrolyte imbalances, and supportive care to maintain organ function while his body recovers. These interventions would have him back on his feet within days, assuming the contamination didn't include antibiotic-resistant organisms. Ancient medicine has no effective treatments for bacterial infections, dehydration, or the complications that arise from waterborne diseases. Physicians might try bloodletting to balance humours, purgatives to expel bad substances, or herbal remedies based on theoretical properties rather than pharmacological effectiveness, but these interventions typically worsen patients' conditions rather than improving them. As Theron's condition deteriorates throughout the day, you witness the community's response to water-related illness that reveals how ancient societies manage health crises without effective medical interventions. The focus shifts from treating individual illness to protecting community health through social mechanisms rather than medical solutions. Neighbours begin avoiding contact with Theron's household to prevent disease transmission, not because they understand bacterial contagion, but because empirical observation shows that illness spreads through proximity to sick people. This social distancing reduces community support for the affected family, but limits epidemic spread that could kill many more people. Religious authorities interpret the illness as evidence of divine displeasure, requiring community-wide responses to appease supernatural forces believed to control health and disease. Increased religious observances, larger sacrifices, and stricter adherence to ritual requirements become community obligations designed to prevent further outbreaks. Economic relationships adjust as people recalculate business dealings with potentially contaminated households. Theron's craft business suffers immediate reputation damage as customers avoid products that might carry disease contamination. Even if he recovers, his economic prospects will remain diminished by association with illness. By afternoon, as Theron's condition approaches terminal stages, you understand that water-related death in ancient Athens isn't just individual tragedy. It's community crisis that affects social relationships, economic activities, and religious practices throughout the neighbourhood. The water collection that seemed like simple daily chore in the morning reveals itself as complex survival activity that requires technical knowledge, physical capability, and social intelligence that most modern humans don't possess. Water management in ancient cities involves understanding of source quality, seasonal variations, contamination patterns, and treatment methods that take years to master. Different wells and fountains have reputations based on user experiences accumulated over generations. Some sources are known for causing stomach problems, others for skin irritation, others for respiratory symptoms. This folk epidemiology provides practical guidance for water selection without scientific understanding of contamination sources. Seasonal patterns affect water quality as rainfall dilutes or concentrates contaminants, as temperature changes influence bacterial growth rates, and as upstream activities vary with agricultural and industrial cycles. Experienced water collectors adjust their source selections based on these patterns, choosing different wells during different times of year. Daily timing affects contamination levels, as morning water often contains higher bacterial concentrations from overnight growth, while afternoon water might be cleaner due to sunlight's antimicrobial effects. Understanding these temporal variations requires local knowledge that newcomers lack, and that can mean the difference between health and disease. Storage and transport techniques influence bacterial multiplication in water containers. With proper handling preventing contamination increases, while poor practices creating ideal conditions for pathogen growth. The ceramic vessels, rope techniques, and transfer methods that seem simple actually require expertise that prevents additional health risks. During the afternoon heat, when water needs increase dramatically due to perspiration and physical exertion, you experience the terror of water scarcity combined with contamination risks. Your modern body, accustomed to unlimited clean water, begins shutting down in Mediterranean temperatures without adequate hydration. Dizziness from dehydration makes pottery work dangerous around kilns and sharp tools. Nausea from heat stress reduces your ability to consume the contaminated water that's available. Confusion from electrolyte imbalance impairs your judgment about work activities that require constant attention for safety. Chrysos notices your distress but doesn't offer additional water rations because water is too precious to waste on someone whose survival prospects remain uncertain. Every drop given to you is a drop not available for established family members whose continued survival is more important for household stability. This calculation isn't heartless. It's practical resource management in circumstances that don't allow for inefficient allocation based on humanitarian principles that presuppose abundance. Modern water distribution systems can afford to provide excess capacity for emergencies and individual variations in consumption. Ancient households must ration strictly to ensure that essential members receive adequate supplies. Your individual suffering is less important than collective survival in social systems designed around scarcity management rather than individual rights. Water allocation decisions reflect mathematical calculations about survival probabilities rather than moral principles about equal access to resources. As evening approaches, you participate in the daily water storage ritual that prepares households for overnight and early morning needs, before wells become crowded and potentially contaminated by increased usage. This ritual involves filling all available containers with the day's collected water, covering them to prevent contamination from insects and debris, and organizing them according to quality and intended usage. The containers themselves present additional contamination risks that modern water storage systems address through material selection and sanitation protocols. Ceramic vessels can harbor bacteria in porous surfaces that are impossible to clean thoroughly with ancient methods. Wooden containers can develop mold and algae growth that contaminate stored water. Even the best available storage methods compromise water quality compared to modern standards. Different containers are designated for different purposes based on size, shape, and perceived cleanliness levels. Drinking water gets the cleanest vessels, cooking water receives moderate quality storage, and washing water goes into containers that might have visible contamination but are still functional for non-consumption purposes. Water quality assessment relies on sensory evaluation, smell, taste, clarity, temperature, that can detect obvious contamination but misses bacterial, viral, and chemical dangers that have no sensory indicators. Ancient Greeks developed sophisticated sensory skills for water evaluation, but they can't detect the most dangerous contamination types that cause serious illness and death. During the evening meal, conversation inevitably turns to water-related community problems that affect everyone's health and survival prospects. These discussions combine practical information sharing with theological speculation about supernatural causes and solutions. The fountain near the agora has tasted strange for weeks, someone reports. Metallic, like blood or rust. Even the animals refuse to drink from it now. The priests examined it for signs of divine displeasure but found nothing obvious. River water upstream has been cloudy since the metalworkers expanded their operations, another person adds. Whatever they're dumping turns the water brown and makes it smell like sulfur. Fish are dying, and people who drink it get sick within days. The temple priests are blessing water sources during morning rituals, a third suggests hopefully. Maybe divine intervention will purify what human pollution has corrupted. The gods have power over water spirits if we make proper offerings. These conversations reveal the desperate search for solutions to water problems that communities can observe and document, but can't address through available technology or social organization. Without understanding of industrial pollution, chemical contamination, or bacterial treatment, people rely on religious interventions and folk remedies that provide psychological comfort but limited practical effectiveness. The economic dimension of water problems creates additional pressure on families already struggling with survival. Clean water costs more than contaminated water because demand exceeds supply for safe sources. Transport costs increase when safe sources are located farther from residential areas. Storage costs rise when contamination requires more frequent water replacement. Medical costs from water-related illness consume resources that might otherwise purchase better water or food. Lost productivity from illness reduces family income while medical expenses increase family costs. The economic burden of unsafe water creates cycles of poverty that trap families in conditions where they can't afford safe water and can't afford the medical consequences of unsafe water. Religious costs from community responses to water contamination add another layer of expense that families struggling with survival can barely manage. Sacrificial offerings to appease water spirits, ritual purification ceremonies for contaminated sources, and increased temple donations for divine intervention require resources that might otherwise improve water access or quality. As night falls and the household prepares for sleep, you realize that water scarcity and contamination will shape every aspect of your ancient existence. Every drink is a calculated risk between immediate death from dehydration and eventual death from contamination. Every source represents a choice between competing dangers that could determine your survival. Water-related decision-making requires constant risk assessment, using incomplete information about contamination sources, variable quality patterns, and treatment effectiveness. Modern humans can turn on taps with confidence that water will be safe for immediate consumption. Ancient Greeks must evaluate every water source for potential hazards while accepting that some contamination is inevitable. The psychological burden of constant water insecurity creates stress that modern humans rarely experience outside of emergency situations. Never knowing whether your next drink might kill you, never being able to satisfy thirst completely, never having access to clean water for washing or cooking. These conditions create anxiety that affects every aspect of daily life. Sleep comes fitfully because thirst wakes you repeatedly throughout the night, but drinking water in darkness increases contamination risks from storage vessels that might have been compromised by insects, rodents, or handling errors. Ancient water management requires vigilance that continues even during rest periods. Your dreams are filled with images of clean, cold water flowing from modern taps, filtered, treated, and safe for unlimited consumption. The technological marvel that modern humans take completely for granted becomes an impossible fantasy in ancient contexts where water access determines survival prospects. When morning arrives, the first conscious thought is water, where to find it, how to treat it, whether it will kill you slowly through contamination or quickly through dehydration. This is ancient existence, constantly thirsty, constantly calculating water-related risks, constantly aware that the substance essential for life is also one of the most dangerous elements of daily survival. The water will kill you, not dramatically through single instances of severe poisoning, but gradually through accumulated contamination that overwhelms your modern immune system. Each day of survival in ancient Athens involves microbial exposure that weakens your body's defenses and increases susceptibility to diseases that ancient Greeks handle through lifetime adaptation. Your modern body, optimized for treated water and controlled conditions, cannot adapt quickly enough to bacterial loads that ancient digestive systems manage routinely. Every contaminated meal, every polluted drink, every exposure to ancient water sources brings you closer to illness that will probably prove fatal in a world without effective medical treatment. The water systems that seem primitive and manageable from historical distance reveal themselves as sophisticated survival technologies when viewed through daily experience. Ancient Greeks developed water management skills that represent generations of accumulated knowledge about sources, treatment, storage, and distribution that ensures community survival under impossible conditions. But these survival technologies work for people adapted to ancient conditions through lifetime experience. They cannot protect modern humans whose bodies, immune systems, and survival skills are optimized for different environmental challenges entirely. The water that sustains ancient communities will systematically destroy visitors from technological civilizations who lack the biological and cultural adaptations that ancient survival requires. By your third day, the cumulative effects of water contamination are already visible in your declining health, energy levels, and physical capabilities. Each day will be worse than the last as bacterial exposure accumulates and your body's defensive resources become depleted. The water is winning its slow war against your modern physiology, and time is running out faster than you realize. This is just the beginning of understanding how different ancient survival requirements are from modern expectations about basic human needs. Water, the most fundamental necessity for life, becomes a constant threat that shapes every decision, every activity, every relationship in ancient societies. And you're losing the battle for survival one contaminated drink at a time. Chapter 3: Your Modern Body as a Liability. By your fourth day in ancient Athens, the full catastrophe of your physical inadequacy has become undeniable. Your soft, pampered, modern body, carefully maintained through climate-controlled environments, ergonomic furniture, processed foods, and medical interventions, is not just unsuited for ancient life. It's actively deteriorating under conditions that ancient Greeks consider normal. Your hands tell the story of modern softness meeting ancient demands. The blisters from claywork have burst and are now open wounds in an environment where infection is both common and deadly. Ancient Greeks developed calloused hands from childhood that can handle rough materials, sharp tools, and corrosive substances without injury. Your hands are accustomed to smartphone screens, computer keyboards, and steering wheels, smooth surfaces designed to prevent the very calluses that ancient survival requires. The difference isn't just uncomfortable, it's potentially lethal. Open wounds in ancient environments mean bacterial infection, and bacterial infections without antibiotics mean death. Your modern immune system, never challenged by the constant minor infections that build ancient resistance, can't handle the bacterial assault that ancient Greeks manage routinely. Melania notices your wounded hands and responds with the exasperated practicality of someone dealing with a helpless child who should know better. She demonstrates wound care techniques that represent centuries of accumulated knowledge about preventing infection without understanding bacterial theory. Wash with wine, bind with clean cloth, keep dry, she instructs, using materials that provide minimal protection and questionable sterility. The wine does contain alcohol that kills some bacteria, but the alcohol concentration is insufficient for proper antiseptic action. The cloth has been cleaned by ancient standards, rinsed in contaminated water and dried in polluted air, but it's not sterile by modern medical standards. Infection will kill you faster than hunger, she adds, matter-of-factly, delivering medical information that's both accurate and terrifying. Without antibiotics, antiseptics, or proper wound care protocols, minor injuries become life-threatening conditions. Ancient Greeks accept infection risks as normal aspects of life, but they understand that proper wound management means the difference between survival and death. Your feet present even more serious problems. Modern footwear, designed for flat, even surfaces like sidewalks, floors, and roads, has left you with feet that can't handle ancient terrain. Your arches are weak from lifetime dependency on artificial support. Your soles are soft from never experiencing rough surfaces. Your toes are weakened from shoes that restrict natural movement and development. The leather foot wrappings you're wearing provide minimal protection against stones, debris, thorns, and the various hazards that cover ancient streets. By midday, you're limping from cuts and bruises that would be minor inconveniences in your time, but are serious problems here because they can become infected in an environment filled with bacteria, parasites, and contaminated materials. Ancient Greeks developed feet that function like natural shoes, tough, resilient, capable of handling rough terrain without injury. Their foot muscles are strong from constant use on uneven surfaces. Their skin is thick enough to resist minor cuts and abrasions. Their balance and proprioception are finely tuned for navigating obstacles that would trip modern walkers. The worst part isn't the pain, it's the realization that you can't work effectively with damaged feet. Pottery requires standing for hours without fatigue, walking repeatedly to collect materials and tend kilns, and maintaining balance while operating equipment that demands precise body positioning. Your modern feet, accustomed to cushioned soles and arch support, simply can't handle ancient work requirements. Your back reveals another catastrophic failure of modern physical development. Contemporary life, with its chairs, cars, and elevated work surfaces, has left you with weak core muscles, poor posture, and spine that can't handle the physical demands of ancient labour. Ancient work happens at ground level, or requires constant bending, lifting, and carrying that your modern spine can't manage without injury. By midday, you're experiencing muscle spasms that would send you to emergency rooms in your time, but are just normal discomfort here that you must work through or face economic consequences. The pain isn't just physical, it's professionally disabling. Pottery work requires precise body positioning, steady hands, and smooth movements that back pain makes impossible. Your reduced productivity due to physical limitations marks you as unsuitable for ancient work environments, where efficiency determines survival. Chrysos watches your struggles with growing irritation that reflects practical business calculations rather than personal animosity. He's invested food, water, shelter, and training time in you, expecting productive labour in return. Instead, he's gotten a liability who can barely complete basic tasks without injury, and whose presence creates additional work for other household members. Useless, he mutters, while observing your latest failed attempt at clay preparation, using ancient Greek vocabulary that's both economically accurate and socially devastating. In ancient economies that operate on subsistence margins, being genuinely useless means being abandoned to die, because resources can't support people who consume more than they produce. Your cardiovascular fitness, such as it is, collapses completely under ancient physical demands. Modern exercise, treadmills, elliptical machines, fitness classes, weight training, prepares you for controlled short-duration activities with recovery periods between sessions. Ancient work requires sustained physical effort for 12 to 14 hours daily, without rest breaks, climate control or recovery time. The cardiovascular demands of ancient labour would challenge trained athletes. Continuous physical activity in hot weather with minimal water breaks, carrying heavy loads over uneven terrain, working in environments with poor air quality and high temperatures. These conditions require fitness levels that modern exercise programs don't develop. By afternoon, you're experiencing symptoms that would alarm modern physicians: chest pain from cardiovascular overexertion, dizziness from dehydration and heat stress, muscle tremors from electrolyte imbalances, and mental confusion from physical exhaustion. In your world, these symptoms would trigger immediate medical intervention and work restrictions. Here, they're just signs that you're not adapted for ancient survival requirements. Ancient Greeks developed cardiovascular fitness through lifetime conditioning that enables them to handle physical demands that would hospitalize modern humans. Your exercise bike fitness is useless for the sustained, variable, real-world physical challenges that ancient labour requires. Your digestive system represents perhaps the most catastrophic failure of modern physiology when confronted with ancient food requirements. Your stomach and intestines, carefully maintained through sanitized food processing, controlled diets, and medical interventions, simply cannot handle the bacterial assault of ancient nutrition. The barley bread that forms the dietary staple is almost indigestible for your modern intestines. It's coarsely ground, often contaminated with stones from grinding processes, and fermented with wild yeasts that create unpredictable bacterial populations. What ancient Greeks consider normal food causes you severe stomach cramps, gas, bloating, and diarrhea that further weakens your already compromised condition. Your modern digestive system expects processed foods with consistent bacterial content, controlled pH levels, and standardized nutritional composition. Ancient foods contain variable bacterial populations, unpredictable contamination, and nutritional profiles that change based on seasonal availability and preservation methods. The dairy products, primarily goat cheese and fermented milk, introduce bacterial strains that your modern gut microbiome has never encountered. Your intestinal bacteria, carefully maintained through sanitized diets and antibiotic treatments, can't adapt quickly enough to handle ancient microbial challenges that require gradual conditioning from childhood. Even the wine causes problems that ancient Greeks don't experience. The lead contamination from ceramic production vessels creates slow poisoning that affects neurological function, cognitive abilities, and physical coordination. The organic acids from primitive fermentation processes irritate your stomach lining and create digestive problems that interfere with nutrient absorption. Your immune system, the product of modern medical care and controlled environments, fails spectacularly when confronted with ancient pathogen loads. Your childhood vaccinations protected you against diseases that don't exist here. Your antibiotic-supported immune responses are useless against ancient bacterial strains that have never encountered pharmaceutical intervention. Within days, you're showing symptoms of multiple infections that your body can't fight effectively. Respiratory infections from breathing contaminated air, skin infections from minor cuts and abrasions, intestinal infections from contaminated food and water. Your modern immune system, trained to handle controlled pathogen exposures in medical settings, is overwhelmed by constant bacterial assault from ancient living conditions. The cumulative effect of immune system failure is rapid deterioration of your overall health and physical capabilities. Infections that ancient Greeks recover from routinely become serious illnesses for you. Minor exposures that native immunity handles easily cause severe reactions in your unprepared system. Your sleep patterns, regulated by artificial lighting and controlled temperatures, collapse under ancient conditions that follow natural cycles and environmental variations. You can't sleep on hard surfaces in smoky rooms surrounded by other people making noise throughout the night. You can't adjust to pre-dawn work schedules that maximize daylight productivity. Sleep deprivation compounds all your other physical problems. Your injured hands heal more slowly without adequate rest. Your digestive problems worsen due to stress hormones released during poor sleep. Your immune system becomes even less effective when deprived of sleep-dependent recovery processes. The cognitive effects of sleep deprivation impair your ability to learn ancient skills, understand complex social situations, or make survival decisions that require clear thinking. Ancient Greeks adapt to sleep conditions that modern humans would consider impossible, developing rest patterns that maintain function despite environmental limitations. Your vision, probably corrected by glasses or contact lenses in modern life, becomes a serious survival handicap in ancient conditions. If you're nearsighted, you can't see dangers in streets, workshops, or natural environments that require distance vision for safety. If you're farsighted, you can't perform detailed craft work that demands precise visual coordination at close range. Ancient Greeks with vision problems adapt their lives to accommodate visual limitations, choosing occupations and social roles that match their visual capabilities. You, suddenly dropped into an environment where visual acuity affects immediate survival, have no time or opportunity for such adaptive career selection. Your hearing, possibly damaged by modern noise pollution and neglect, fails to detect important survival information that ancient Greeks use routinely for navigation, safety, and social interaction. You can't distinguish between normal household sounds and warning signals that indicate danger. You can't understand whispered conversations that contain crucial social intelligence. Your sense of smell, probably impaired by modern air pollution and processed foods, can't detect contamination, spoilage, or environmental hazards that ancient Greeks rely upon for daily survival decisions. Food safety, water quality, air contamination, and material conditions that determine health outcomes are invisible to your compromised sensory capabilities. As the day progresses, you witness the physical capabilities of ancient Greeks that highlight your own comprehensive inadequacy. Xanthi, the 12-year-old slave girl, can carry water loads that strain your adult muscles. Nikeas, Chrysos' teenage son, can work at the potter's wheel for hours without the back pain that cripples you within minutes. Even elderly ancient Greeks, worn down by decades of hard labour and poor nutrition, demonstrate physical competencies that exceed your modern capabilities. Their hands can perform delicate craft work that your soft fingers fumble. Their backs can handle lifting and carrying that destroys your spine. Their feet can walk on rough terrain that leaves you injured and limping. Most humiliating, their mental resilience far exceeds your modern psychological preparation for physical hardship. They accept pain, discomfort, and physical stress as normal aspects of existence that don't require special attention or accommodation. You're constantly overwhelmed by sensory input, emotional reactions, and physical demands that they handle with matter-of-fact competence. This isn't just a question of physical fitness levels, it's about fundamental adaptation to environmental requirements that shape human development from birth. Ancient Greeks developed their physical capabilities through evolutionary pressure and lifetime conditioning that creates bodies optimized for ancient survival challenges. Your modern body, developed through technological assistance and controlled environments, is optimized for contemporary survival challenges that require different physical capabilities entirely. The strength, endurance, and skills that make you functional in modern environments are useless or counterproductive for ancient survival requirements. The mismatch isn't temporary or correctable through training programs that modern fitness culture might suggest. Ancient physical adaptation requires childhood development under ancient conditions, lifetime exposure to ancient challenges, and genetic selection pressure that eliminates people whose bodies can't handle ancient requirements. You're not just temporarily uncomfortable or inadequately prepared, you're genuinely unsuitable for ancient survival, in ways that no amount of effort or time could fully correct. Your modern physiology represents thousands of years of human development that has created capabilities for technological civilization while sacrificing capabilities for subsistent survival. As evening approaches and you collapse from another day of failed attempts at productive labour, you realise that your physical inadequacy isn't just personally embarrassing, it's economically and socially disastrous. In ancient societies where physical capability determines social value, your modern body marks you for elimination through natural selection processes that modern societies have eliminated through technological assistance. Chrysos hasn't said anything directly, but his calculations are becoming obvious through reduced food portions, decreased attention to your needs, and increased criticism of your work performance. You consume resources without generating equivalent value. Your injuries require care that diverts attention from productive activities. Your inability to perform basic tasks creates additional work for other household members. Modern societies accommodate physical limitations through technology, medical interventions, legal protections, and social support systems that ensure survival regardless of individual physical capabilities. Ancient societies eliminate physical inadequacy through economic pressure and social abandonment that remove unsuitable individuals from community resources. Your modern body isn't just failing to thrive in ancient conditions, it's actively dying from the accumulated stress of environmental demands that exceed its adaptive capabilities. Each day of survival becomes more difficult as injuries accumulate, health deteriorates, and physical reserves become depleted. The tragedy is that your modern body represents remarkable achievements in human development: longevity, disease resistance, cognitive capability, and adaptation to technological environments that ancient humans couldn't imagine. But these achievements come at the cost of survival capabilities that were once essential for human existence. Ancient Greeks would face similar challenges if transported to modern technological civilization. Their physical capabilities, optimized for subsistence survival, would be poorly suited for contemporary requirements that emphasize cognitive skills, technological competence, and social integration within complex institutions. The lesson isn't that ancient or modern human development is superior, it's that historical changes create different survival requirements that shape human capabilities in corresponding ways. Your physical failure in ancient Athens demonstrates both the costs of technological civilization and the remarkable environmental specificity of human adaptation. As you prepare for another night of painful sleep on hard surfaces, surrounded by smoke and noise that prevent proper rest, you understand that your modern body is more than just inadequate for ancient survival. It's evidence of how far human civilization has progressed beyond subsistence conditions that once defined human existence. Chapter 4. The social hierarchy will eliminate you. You thought the physical challenges were devastating? Wait until you encounter the social labyrinth that determines life and death in ancient Athens with algorithmic precision. Modern humans are accustomed to societies with social mobility, legal protections, and relatively egalitarian institutions where individual merit can overcome social disadvantages. Ancient Greece operates on rigid hierarchies where your social position literally determines whether you live or die, and you're starting at the absolute bottom of a system designed to eliminate people exactly like you. Let's be brutally clear about where you stand in Athenian society. You are nobody. Not just poor or disadvantaged in the modern sense. You are literally nobody in legal, social, and economic terms. You have no family connections that provide social identity, no citizenship status that grants legal protections, no patron relationships that offer economic opportunities, no guild memberships that ensure professional support, no religious affiliations that provide community assistance, and no property that gives you legal standing. In ancient Greek social systems, identity comes entirely from relationships rather than individual characteristics. You're not John Smith the accountant or Maria Garcia the teacher. You're Socrates, son of Sophroniscus of the Dem Alapec, or Aspasia, the companion of Pericles, or Lysias the metic from Syracuse. Without these relational identifiers, you effectively don't exist in any meaningful social sense. This invisibility isn't just socially awkward, like being new in a modern workplace. It's genuinely life-threatening. Ancient Greek legal systems provide protection only for people with recognized social status who can bring complaints, present evidence, and seek justice through established procedures. If someone robs you, assaults you, cheats you, or even kills you. There may be no legal consequences because you have no standing to seek justice, and no family or community to pursue remedies on your behalf. During your morning walk to the pottery workshop, you witness this social hierarchy operating with the brutal efficiency of natural law. A well-dressed citizen strikes a slave who's moving too slowly with his burden, and no one intervenes because slaves have no legal rights and assault against property isn't a crime. A merchant shortchanges a foreign worker in a commercial transaction, knowing the victim has no recourse through Athenian courts that don't recognise non-citizens as legitimate plaintiffs. A group of young aristocrats harass craftsmen who endure the abuse without complaint, because protesting would bring retaliation from people with social connections, political influence, and legal immunity for actions against social inferiors. The craftsmen understand that their survival depends on tolerating abuse from social superiors who can destroy their livelihoods without legal consequences. Your modern sense of justice rebels against these scenes of systematic oppression, but your developing ancient survival instincts recognise that you're even more vulnerable than these victims. At least slaves have owners who protect them as valuable property worth preserving. Foreign workers usually have ethnic communities that provide mutual support and collective defence. Craftsmen belong to professional networks that offer economic cooperation and social solidarity. You have nobody, no protectors, no advocates, no community, no support system of any kind. You exist in the gaps between established social categories, which means you exist outside the social systems that make survival possible in ancient Greek civilization. Chrysos calls you over to meet Timon, a wealthy pottery client who's commissioning special vessels for an upcoming religious ceremony. This interaction provides a masterclass in ancient social dynamics that would be completely alien to modern democratic sensibilities, but represents normal social interaction in hierarchical societies. Timon doesn't acknowledge your existence directly, though you're standing right next to Chrysos during their business discussion. He speaks about you in the third person, your helper, or that one, when your involvement in his commission requires discussion, but he never addresses you as a person deserving direct recognition. This isn't personal rudeness or individual prejudice. It's systematic social protocol that reflects fundamental assumptions about human worth and social relationship. Recognition implies social relationship, and social relationship implies mutual obligation, which people avoid with individuals beneath their status level to prevent unwanted responsibilities and complications. When Timon does address you directly, it's with the tone and vocabulary typically reserved for domestic animals or inanimate objects. No pleasantries, no consideration for your comfort or opinions, just instructions delivered with the assumption of immediate, unquestioning compliance. You're expected to respond with complete deference, eyes downcast, brief acknowledgements, no unsolicited comments or questions. Your modern instincts rebel violently against this treatment. In your world, basic human dignity is considered universal. Customer service interactions involve polite exchanges regardless of economic status. Even clear employer-employee relationships maintain some semblance of mutual respect and professional courtesy. Here, social hierarchy is absolute, unquestioned, and enforced through every interaction. Your individual worth, intelligence, potential, or personal qualities are irrelevant to social positioning determined entirely by birth circumstances, legal status, and community relationships that you had no role in creating. But here's the cruel irony that makes this system particularly insidious. You need this social hierarchy to survive. Timon's condescending treatment comes with economic benefits for Chrysos' household, which translates to better food, safer working conditions, and more stable employment for everyone associated with the workshop, including you. Rejecting the hierarchy's premises, demanding equal treatment, insisting on personal dignity, challenging social assumptions, would mean rejecting the support systems that keep you alive. Ancient social hierarchies aren't just oppressive systems that could be reformed through political action. They're survival technologies that ensure resource distribution in societies without adequate resources for egalitarian allocation. As the morning progresses, you learn about citizenship, the golden ticket of ancient Greek society that you'll never possess, and that provides comprehensive life insurance for those lucky enough to achieve it. Citizenship isn't just political participation rights, it's total social protection that determines access to legal systems, economic opportunities, community support, and basic survival resources. Nicias, Croesus's teenage son, explains citizenship requirements with the casual arrogance of someone born into unearned privilege. Both parents must be Athenian citizens, born in Athens to properly married couples, he recites like a catechism. Military service for men, religious participation for women, continuous residence in Attica, and acceptance by the Dem community as legitimate members. These requirements aren't bureaucratic hurdles that could be streamlined through administrative reform. They're designed to exclude the vast majority of Athens' population from political and legal protections. Foreigners, slaves, women, and the children of mixed marriages are permanently excluded from citizenship regardless of their contributions to Athenian society, their length of residence, or their personal qualifications. What about people who move here as children and grow up Athenian, you ask, thinking about modern concepts of naturalization and birthright citizenship? Nicias laughs, with the certainty of someone whose worldview has never been challenged. Foreign blood is foreign blood. The gods made Greeks superior to barbarians for a reason, and mixing the bloodlines weakens both. Athens maintains its greatness by preserving the purity of citizen stock. This isn't teenage prejudice that he'll outgrow with education and maturity. It's mainstream Athenian ideology that justifies systematic exclusion and exploitation. The democratic ideals that make Athens famous in your historical understanding apply only to a small minority of the population, while everyone else lives in various forms of legal and social subordination. During your midday break, you witness a citizenship verification proceeding that demonstrates the deadly serious nature of status boundaries and the consequences of crossing them. A middle-aged man is accused of falsely claiming citizenship privileges, which carries penalties ranging from permanent enslavement to immediate execution. The proceeding happens in the street, with neighbours serving as witnesses, judges and enforcers in a legal system that combines formal procedures with community justice. The accused presents evidence of his citizenship claims, family genealogies going back several generations, witness testimony from established citizens, records of military service and religious participation, and documentation of Deme membership. But his accent suggests foreign origins. His skin has the darkness that Athenians associate with inferior races, and his economic circumstances indicate the kind of desperation that might drive someone to attempt citizenship fraud. Despite his evidence, the community renders a verdict of guilty based more on suspicion and prejudice than legal proof. The punishment is swift and comprehensive. The man's property is confiscated for community distribution, his family members are sold into slavery to recover legal costs, and he's beaten in the public square before being expelled permanently from Attic territory. The crowd watches with approval, seeing justice served against someone who attempted to steal privileges reserved for legitimate Greeks. This scene terrifies you because it demonstrates how quickly social position can collapse even for people with documentation and community connections. Your complete lack of legal status makes you infinitely more vulnerable to accusations, violence, and elimination without any pretense of legal procedure. The afternoon brings education about the patron-client system that governs economic relationships and could determine your survival prospects if you can somehow gain access to its protections. Chrysos explains this system carefully while working at his potter's wheel, his words chosen with diplomatic precision because patron relationships involve sensitive political and social considerations. Wealthy citizens need pottery for religious ceremonies, symposia, and household use, he explains, while centering clay with practice movements. We provide quality goods and reliable service. They provide payment, protection from competitors, assistance with legal problems, and recommendations to other potential clients. It's mutually beneficial cooperation between social levels. This description makes the patron-client system sound like modern business networking, but the reality involves dependencies and obligations that would shock contemporary workers accustomed to employment contracts, legal protections, and professional autonomy. Chrysos must provide political support for his patrons, regardless of his personal beliefs or interests. When they run for office, he campaigns for them. When they need testimony in legal proceedings, he speaks on their behalf. When they request favours or services beyond the nominal business relationship, he complies without question or compensation. He must prioritise their orders even when more profitable work is available from other clients, because maintaining patron relationships matters more than maximising short-term income. He must loan money when they request it, provide information about neighbourhood activities when they inquire, and offer hospitality when they visit his workshop or home. Most disturbing from modern perspectives, he must provide access to household members when patrons express interest. This includes his wife for social occasions, his son for potential apprenticeship or military service, his slave for temporary labour assignments, and even you as workshop assistant if circumstances require it. If a patron wants to inspect working conditions, question employees about their backgrounds, or temporarily remove household members for various purposes, Chrysos has little choice but to comply. Your safety, comfort, and personal autonomy depend entirely on the goodwill of people who have no reason to care about your welfare and every reason to prioritise their own interests. This system isn't corruption or abuse of power. It's normal social relationship in hierarchical societies, where protection flows downward through personal relationships rather than institutional guarantees. Patrons have obligations to provide protection and assistance to their clients, but these obligations are personal rather than legal and can be withdrawn at any time for any reason. As evening approaches, you attend a neighbourhood religious ceremony that reveals how thoroughly religion functions as social surveillance and control system rather than personal spiritual practice. Ancient Greek religion isn't just individual belief, it's community compliance enforcement that maintains social order through supernatural authority. The ceremony requires participants to demonstrate proper religious knowledge, perform prescribed rituals with technical precision, and make appropriate offerings that reflect their social status and economic capabilities. Failure to participate correctly marks you as impious, foreign, or dangerous to community spiritual welfare. You struggle through the ceremony, trying to imitate others without understanding the theological principles, mythological references, or ritual significance that native participants absorb through lifetime cultural immersion. Your mistakes are immediately obvious to everyone present, marking you as an outsider who doesn't belong in Athenian religious community. The priest notices your confusion and makes pointed comments about foreign pollution contaminating sacred spaces and threatening community relationships with protective deities. Ancient Greek concepts of religious pollution aren't metaphorical. They're literal beliefs about spiritual contamination that can be transmitted through contact with impious individuals and that requires purification to prevent divine anger. Foreign spirits follow foreign people, the priest announces while looking directly at you. They corrupt our ceremonies and anger our gods with alien practices and impure intentions. The community must consider whether purification rituals are adequate or whether stronger measures are needed to protect our spiritual health. This isn't theological prejudice or religious intolerance in modern senses. It's practical community health management based on beliefs about spiritual contamination that treat your presence as potential epidemic threat to collective divine protection. The purification rituals he's suggesting could range from expensive ceremonies that bankrupt you financially to permanent exile from religious community that eliminates your social existence. After the ceremony, neighbours who seemed friendly during previous encounters begin maintaining careful distance from you. Your religious incompetence has marked you as spiritually dangerous to community welfare. An association with you might contaminate other people's relationships with protective deities. In societies where divine anger can bring plague, crop failure, military defeat, or natural disasters, religious deviance is treated as community threat rather than personal choice. Your inability to participate authentically in religious life eliminates your access to social networks that provide essential support during emergencies. The evening meal brings conversation that explains why social mobility, so fundamental to modern society, simply doesn't exist in ancient Greece, except through extraordinary circumstances that usually involve warfare, political upheaval, or other disruptions of normal social order. Melania discusses a neighbouring family whose teenage son shows exceptional intelligence and artistic ability, but will remain a leather worker because that's his father's profession and social position. The gods assign people to their proper places in the social order, she explains, with the certainty of someone whose worldview has never been questioned. Trying to rise above your station brings divine punishment for presumption and social chaos that harms everyone. This isn't conservative ideology that could be changed through political reform. It's fundamental social organisation principle that ensures stability in societies without economic surplus for supporting mobility. Social mobility would destabilise the patron-client relationships, guild structures, and family networks that provide essential support during crises. Individual advancement threatens collective survival, by disrupting established resource distribution systems and social support networks. Ancient Greek societies prioritized group stability over individual opportunity because group survival takes precedence over personal fulfillment when resources are genuinely scarce. The economic reasoning behind social immobility becomes clear when you understand that ancient societies operate on subsistence margins that don't allow for the economic inefficiency that social mobility creates. Training people for new occupations, supporting them during transition periods, and accommodating their failed attempts at advancement require resources that subsistent societies simply don't have. As you prepare for sleep on the familiar dirt floor, you realize that ancient Greek social hierarchy isn't just unfair by modern standards, it's a comprehensive survival system that sacrifices individual freedom for collective security in environments where both can't be achieved simultaneously. Your modern values rebel against systematic inequality, rigid social boundaries, and limited personal autonomy. But your developing ancient survival needs to recognize that social hierarchy provides the only available protection against starvation, violence, and abandonment in societies without institutional safety nets or economic surplus for humanitarian principles. The cruel truth is that ancient Greek social hierarchies work effectively for people who have recognized places within them. Citizens enjoy legal protections, economic opportunities, and community support that sustain them through difficulties. Even slaves have defined positions with corresponding rights, obligations, and protections that provide security within subordination. You're the anomaly, someone outside the system entirely with no recognized place and no defined relationships. Ancient Greek society literally has no social category for people like you, which means no institutions to protect you, no traditions to guide your integration, and no customs to govern your treatment by others. Your greatest challenge isn't physical labor, contaminated water, or primitive medical care. It's finding a place in social systems that don't acknowledge your existence. Without social integration, all other survival challenges become exponentially more difficult because you lack the community support that makes individual survival possible. Tomorrow will bring new lessons in social navigation, but tonight you fall asleep knowing that your biggest threat isn't disease or accident. It's social invisibility that makes you vulnerable to elimination through mechanisms that ancient Greeks consider normal social maintenance rather than injustice or oppression. The social hierarchy that seems cruel and arbitrary from modern perspectives represents sophisticated resource management technology that ensures community survival under impossible conditions. It works by systematically eliminating people who can't contribute adequately to collective welfare, and based on your current social position, you're a prime candidate for such elimination. Ancient Athens achieved its remarkable cultural accomplishments not despite systematic social inequality, but partly because hierarchical organization concentrated resources and opportunities among people most capable of using them productively for community benefit. The philosophy, art, and political theory that make ancient Greece famous were subsidized by social systems that modern humanitarian principles would condemn. Your failure to thrive in ancient social conditions isn't personal inadequacy. It's evidence of how thoroughly modern human development depends on egalitarian institutions that ancient societies couldn't afford to maintain. You're adapted for social environments that won't exist for thousands of years, just as your body is adapted for technological assistance that ancient Greeks couldn't imagine. The question isn't whether ancient or modern social organization is morally superior, but whether you can survive long enough in ancient conditions to appreciate the historical achievement that modern egalitarian ideals represent. Based on your current social position, that survival seems increasingly unlikely with each passing day. Chapter 5. Medicine will torture you to death. You wake up on your 5th day with a fever that would send any sensible modern person straight to urgent care for antibiotics and professional medical attention. Nothing dramatic, just the low-grade temperature rise and general malaise that signals your immune system is losing its battle against the constant bacterial assault of ancient living conditions. In Athens circa 450 BCE, this combination of symptoms marks the beginning of what will likely be your final illness. The fever isn't mysterious or unexpected. Your modern immune system, overwhelmed by continuous exposure to pathogens that ancient Greeks handle routinely, has finally succumbed to bacterial invasion through your wounded hands, contaminated food consumption, and respiratory exposure to workshop dust and smoke. Your body is fighting multiple infections simultaneously while lacking the nutritional resources, rest, and medical support necessary for recovery. Melania notices your condition immediately. Fever detection is a critical survival skill in households where illness spreads rapidly and kills regularly. But her response would horrify modern medical professionals and probably violate numerous contemporary medical ethics standards. Instead of isolating you or seeking effective treatment, she begins implementing ancient Greek medical practices that are more dangerous than most diseases. Bad humours, she diagnoses with complete confidence, despite having no medical training beyond folk knowledge passed down through generations of trial and error. Too much blood and yellow bile, creating heat imbalance in your body, will correct the humoral disorder before fever reaches your brain and causes permanent madness or death. Her diagnostic framework is based on humoralism, the ancient Greek medical theory that illness results from imbalances among 4 bodily fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, choler, and black bile, melancholia. This theory is completely wrong by modern medical understanding, but it represents the most sophisticated healthcare knowledge available in 450 BCE and will guide treatment decisions that determine whether you live or die. According to humoral theory, your fever indicates excess blood and yellow bile, creating hot conditions in your body that must be cooled through removal of heated humours and addition of cooling substances. The logic seems reasonable within ancient theoretical frameworks, but the practical treatments based on this logic are medical torture that will probably kill you faster than bacterial infection would. The first intervention is bloodletting, deliberately opening veins to drain blood that ancient physicians believe causes fever through excessive volume or corrupted quality. Melania uses a bronze knife that's never been sterilized according to modern surgical standards, creating incisions in your arm that are intended to release bad blood, but actually introduce additional bacteria into your already compromised circulatory system. The bloodletting procedure is agonizing in ways that modern anesthesia has made unnecessary for surgical patients. Ancient Greeks performed medical procedures without pain relief beyond wine consumption, which provides minimal analgesic effects while potentially interfering with blood clotting and immune responses. You experience every cut, every probe, every manipulation of tissue without pharmaceutical assistance. Modern medicine would recognize bloodletting as actively harmful treatment that weakens patients through blood loss, while introducing infection risks through unsterile procedures. Ancient medicine considers it essential intervention that prevents fever from progressing to fatal levels by removing the humoral imbalances that cause illness. The blood loss, perhaps a pint or more, leaves you weaker and more vulnerable to the bacterial infections that are actually causing your fever. Your reduced blood volume decreases oxygen delivery to tissues, impairs immune system function, and eliminates red blood cells that carry nutrients necessary for recovery. Ancient physicians interpret your increased weakness as evidence that bad humours are being successfully drained from your system. Next comes dietary treatment based on humoral theory's classification of foods according to heating or cooling properties that supposedly affect internal temperature and humoral balance. You're given foods considered cold and moist to counteract your hot and dry fever condition. Barley water, cucumber juice, lettuce preparations, and diluted wine mixed with specific herbs. This dietary approach isn't entirely wrong. Maintaining hydration during fever is medically sound advice that ancient Greeks discovered through empirical observation, but the specific food choices are based on theoretical principles rather than nutritional science, and some prescribed substances could be harmful to patients with compromised immune systems. The herbal treatments represent both the sophistication and the danger of ancient pharmacology. Some herbs prescribed for fever treatment do contain compounds with genuine therapeutic benefits. Willow bark with aspirin-like anti-inflammatory properties, honey with antimicrobial effects, certain plant extracts with immune-supporting vitamins and minerals. But other prescribed treatments are genuinely toxic substances that could kill patients outright. Lead-based compounds for cooling blood, mercury preparations for purging corrupted humours, plant extracts that are poisonous in the dosages recommended by ancient medical texts. Ancient physicians prescribed these substances with complete confidence because their theoretical frameworks don't distinguish between therapeutic and toxic effects. The herbal pharmacy available to ancient Greek physicians includes hundreds of plant, animal, and mineral preparations with wildly variable potency, purity, and safety profiles. Without standardized preparation methods, quality control, or dosage guidelines, herbal medicine becomes pharmaceutical roulette, where patients might receive beneficial compounds, harmless placebos, or lethal poisons depending on factors that no one can predict or control. As your condition worsens throughout the morning, partly from illness progression but largely from medical treatment that's actively harming you, Chrysos decides to consult a professional physician. This represents a major economic sacrifice that reflects genuine concern for your survival, but also practical calculation about household labour needs during busy pottery production periods. The physician who arrives represents the pinnacle of ancient Greek medical knowledge, trained in Hippocratic methods and experienced in treating diverse conditions according to the most advanced theoretical frameworks available in the ancient world. By contemporary standards, he would be considered a highly qualified healthcare professional, deserving of respect and consultation fees that reflect his expertise. His examination follows procedures that would be familiar to modern patients, checking pulse and respiratory patterns, observing skin colour and texture, examining eyes and mouth for signs of systemic illness, palpating abdominal areas for organ abnormalities, and asking detailed questions about symptom onset, progression, and associated problems. His diagnostic methods rely on careful observation and logical reasoning, principles that remain fundamental to modern medical practice. Ancient physicians developed sophisticated clinical skills through experience with thousands of patients, creating diagnostic capabilities that can identify many conditions accurately, despite lacking technological assistance for internal examination. But his conclusions about your condition are based on theoretical frameworks that bear no relationship to actual disease processes occurring in your body. He diagnoses severe yellow bile excess complicated by blood corruption, probably caused by your foreign constitution's inability to adapt to Athenian climate, diet, and spiritual environment. According to his analysis, your fever represents your body's attempt to burn off corrupted humours through increased internal heat, but the process has become uncontrolled and threatens to consume healthy tissues along with disease substances. Treatment must remove excess humours while cooling your system to prevent fatal overheating that would cook your internal organs. The treatment plan he prescribes would constitute medical malpractice by modern standards, but represent standard care according to ancient Greek medical knowledge: aggressive purging to eliminate corrupted humours through induced vomiting and diarrhoea, additional bloodletting to drain heated blood, dietary restrictions to prevent formation of new corrupted substances, and herbal preparations to cool your system and restore humoral balance. The purging regimen involves administering substances that are literally poisonous: hellebore, colocynth, scammony, and other plant compounds that cause violent gastrointestinal reactions designed to empty your digestive system of corrupted materials. The theory is that eliminating stomach and intestinal contents will remove corrupted substances causing your illness. The reality is that purging will dehydrate you through fluid loss, disrupt your electrolyte balance through mineral depletion, damage your intestinal lining through chemical irritation, and potentially cause death through toxic shock from poisonous substances that ancient physicians don't recognize as dangerous. Modern emergency medicine would treat poisoning from purgative compounds with activated charcoal, intravenous fluid replacement, electrolyte monitoring, and supportive care to prevent organ failure. Ancient medicine interprets poisoning symptoms as evidence that treatment is working to expel corrupted humours from your system. The physician's confidence in his treatment methods is absolute and unshakable. He's treated hundreds of similar cases using these techniques and achieved what he considers successful outcomes. Patients who recovered did so because of his interventions, while patients who died succumbed to particularly severe humoral imbalances that couldn't be corrected quickly enough through available treatments. Modern epidemiology would recognize that his successful treatments probably involved placebo effects, natural recovery processes, or mild cases that would have resolved without intervention. His failed treatments likely killed patients who might have survived with supportive care or no treatment at all. But without controlled studies, statistical analysis, or understanding of disease mechanisms, ancient physicians can't distinguish between helpful and harmful interventions. The first round of purgatives begins your education in ancient medical torture disguised as therapeutic care. The substances taste horrible: bitter, burning, nauseating flavours that trigger immediate revulsion, and probably serve as warning signals that your body recognizes as dangerous. But ancient medical theory interprets your body's rejection of these substances as evidence of humoral corruption that must be overcome through persistent treatment. The gastrointestinal effects are violent and immediate: projectile vomiting that continues long after your stomach is empty, diarrhea that persists for hours while depleting your body's water and mineral reserves, abdominal cramping that would double you over if you had enough strength to move voluntarily. Modern patients would be hospitalized immediately for dehydration management and toxicity treatment. Between episodes of violent purging, the physician explains his treatment philosophy with the calm authority of someone whose methods are never questioned by patients, desperate for relief from suffering. Disease represents imbalance between opposing forces within the body, he explains, while mixing additional purgative compounds. Restoration of harmony requires dramatic intervention to overcome corrupted substances that resist natural correction. This explanation satisfies everyone present because it provides logical framework for understanding suffering that seems random and meaningless. Your illness isn't just bad luck or divine punishment. It's a natural process that can be understood, predicted, and corrected through proper medical intervention based on scientific principles. The problem is that ancient Greek scientific principles are elaborate theoretical constructions built on foundations that are completely wrong. The logic is impeccable, the reasoning is sophisticated, and the internal consistency is remarkable. But the basic assumptions about human physiology, disease processes, and therapeutic mechanisms are so inaccurate that logical treatments based on these assumptions become systematic torture. The afternoon brings additional interventions that demonstrate the full horror of ancient medical practice applied to serious illness. Cauterization with heated bronze instruments to burn out infection sites, application of corrosive substances to create wounds that will drain corrupted fluids, and forced exercise during fever to sweat out bad humours through increased perspiration. Each treatment is administered with complete confidence in its therapeutic value and careful attention to technical details that reflect generations of accumulated medical knowledge. The physician has extensive training in anatomy, based on animal dissection, pharmacology, based on empirical observation, and therapeutic techniques, based on theoretical principles and clinical experience. By contemporary standards, you're receiving the best possible medical care available in the ancient world from a qualified professional whose knowledge represents centuries of accumulated medical wisdom. The fact that this care is more likely to kill you than cure you reflects limitations of ancient medical understanding rather than incompetence or malice on the part of your physician. Modern medicine would address your condition, probably a bacterial infection complicated by dehydration and malnutrition, with targeted antibiotics to eliminate pathogenic organisms, intravenous fluids to correct electrolyte imbalances, nutritional support to aid recovery, and comfort measures to manage symptoms while your body heals itself. These interventions would have you back on your feet within days, assuming the infection doesn't involve antibiotic-resistant strains that require more sophisticated treatment. The cost would be modest, the procedures would be comfortable, and the success rate would be extremely high for otherwise healthy patients. Ancient medicine has no effective treatments for bacterial infections, no methods for replacing lost fluids and electrolytes, no understanding of nutritional requirements during illness, and no pharmaceutical options for symptom management that don't involve additional health risks. Every medical intervention carries significant dangers that often exceed the risks posed by untreated illness. As your condition deteriorates under this medical care, blood loss from repeated bleeding, dehydration from purgative treatments, chemical burns from caustic applications, and systemic poisoning from herbal preparations, the household begins practical preparations for death that ancient families consider normal medical contingency planning. These preparations aren't callous abandonment of hope. They're realistic responses to medical treatment outcomes that everyone understands to be unpredictable and frequently fatal. Even the best ancient medical care fails more often than it succeeds, and households must plan for likely outcomes rather than hoping for miraculous recoveries. Your personal possessions, minimal as they are, become inheritance questions that must be resolved before death complicates legal arrangements. Ancient Greek inheritance law doesn't recognize individual will-making for people in your social position, so your few belongings become household property that Chrysos can distribute as he sees fit. Economic arrangements for replacing your labour contribution must be made immediately because pottery production can't wait for medical outcomes that might not resolve for weeks. Your illness creates productivity losses that threaten household income during periods when workshop output must meet existing obligations and seasonal demands. Religious preparations involve rituals and offerings designed to ensure proper soul transition to afterlife destinations that depend on correct spiritual procedures during dying processes. Ancient Greek religion treats death as a complex spiritual journey that requires community support and proper ritual guidance to achieve successful completion. The most disturbing aspect of these death preparations is their matter-of-fact, business-like nature that treats your dying as normal household management issue rather than emotional crisis requiring grief and mourning. Death from illness is so common in ancient life that families develop efficient procedures for handling mortality without disrupting ongoing survival activities that can't be postponed for emotional processing. Chrysos discusses arrangements for your replacement worker while you're dying in the same room, calculating labour costs and training requirements for new pottery assistants. Melania plans food allocation adjustments for reduced household size while nursing you through what everyone expects to be final illness. These conversations aren't callous. They're practical planning for economic realities that don't accommodate sentiment or grief. As consciousness fades in and out through fever, delirium, and pharmaceutical poisoning, you realise that ancient medical experience differs fundamentally from modern healthcare in ways that extend far beyond treatment effectiveness. Ancient medicine is intimate, communal, and integrated into household life rather than isolated in specialised facilities with professional staff. Your individual suffering is tragedy for you, but community problem for everyone else whose lives are disrupted by your illness, treatment costs, and potential death. Ancient medical systems can't afford individualistic approaches to healthcare that modern medicine takes for granted, because individual medical needs must be balanced against collective survival requirements. The religious dimension of ancient medicine adds spiritual significance to physical suffering that modern secular medicine doesn't provide. Your illness becomes divine communication about moral behaviour, community relationships, and supernatural interventions in human affairs. Medical treatment includes religious components designed to address spiritual causes of illness that pharmaceutical interventions can't reach. These religious interpretations serve essential psychological functions in societies without effective medical treatment. They provide explanatory frameworks for incomprehensible suffering, community support systems for families under medical stress, and meaning-making structures that render individual tragedy comprehensible within larger cosmic purposes. But they also prevent the empirical observation and experimental methodology that could lead to genuine medical progress. Ancient physicians remain trapped in theoretical frameworks that make systematic improvement impossible, because religious worldviews discourage the kind of skeptical investigation that modern science requires. As evening approaches and your condition reaches critical stages, multiple organ systems failing under combined stress of illness and medical treatment, you understand that ancient Greek medicine represents a particular kind of intellectual tragedy. Brilliant minds applying rigorous logical thinking to fundamentally incorrect assumptions about human biology and disease processes. The physician treating you is not stupid, incompetent, or malevolent. He's highly educated, extensively experienced, and deeply committed to healing practices that represent the best available medical knowledge in his historical context. His failure to help you reflects limitations of ancient scientific methodology, rather than personal inadequacy or professional negligence. But from your perspective as a patient experiencing medical torture, disguised as therapeutic care, his good intentions don't matter. Ancient Greek medicine embodies one of history's cruelest ironies. The more medical attention you receive, the more likely you are to die from treatment rather than disease. Your last coherent thought before unconsciousness claims you is desperate longing for simple modern medical interventions that could save your life easily. Antibiotics for bacterial infection, IV saline for dehydration, basic pain relief for comfort during recovery. These technological marvels that modern patients consider routine are impossibly sophisticated achievements compared to ancient medical capabilities. Ancient Greek medicine kills you not through malice or incompetence, but through logical application of theoretical knowledge that is systematically wrong about fundamental aspects of human physiology. You're dying from the historical accident of being sick in a time before effective medical knowledge existed, regardless of how sophisticated ancient medical theory appeared to its practitioners. The tragedy extends beyond individual death to encompass the thousands of years during which brilliant human minds developed elaborate medical systems that were worse than no treatment at all. Ancient patients died not because their diseases were incurable, but because their medical treatments were based on theories that bore no relationship to biological reality. Your death represents not just personal loss, but historical waste of human potential, eliminated by medical systems that couldn't distinguish between helping and harming patients. The ancient world lost countless individuals who could have contributed to human knowledge and cultural development if they had access to effective healthcare that wouldn't exist for millennia. As the final darkness approaches, you carry the bitter knowledge that effective treatments for your condition exist in a future you'll never see, while the sophisticated medical care available in your current time is systematically destroying your body through well-intentioned torture. Ancient Greek medicine doesn't fail because it's primitive. It fails because it's sophisticatedly wrong about fundamental biological processes. This is how ancient medicine kills, not through neglect or ignorance, but through confident application of theoretical knowledge that turns healing into inadvertent homicide. And tomorrow, assuming anyone survives ancient medical care, the same treatments will be applied to new patients with the same lethal confidence, because ancient medical systems can't learn from their failures without scientific methodology that won't be developed for thousands of years. Chapter 6. Violence is your daily bread. You regain consciousness to sounds that would require police intervention in any modern society. Screaming, the dull impact of clubs against flesh, and the sickeningly familiar rhythm of systematic beating. Through the smoke-stained window opening, you witness a scene that would traumatize contemporary observers. 3 men methodically beating another person with wooden implements, while a crowd gathers to watch with the casual interest of spectators observing street performers. This isn't a random crime requiring emergency response. It's normal dispute resolution in a society where violence serves as the primary method for conflict management, social control and justice. Here, strength and fear dictate social standing, and public displays of brutality reinforce the unwritten rules of conduct. The victim, writhing and barely conscious, is neither helped nor spared. He is a lesson, a living reminder that weakness invites domination. The crowd murmurs, some cheering, others merely observing, but none intervenes. In this world, to hesitate is to be complicit in the maintenance of societal order. The air is thick with smoke and the metallic tang of blood, a scent so common that it barely registers to those accustomed to it. Children, wide-eyed and silent, cling to the edges of the crowd, learning early that violence is routine, a fundamental part of life. Women sit nearby, their expressions hardened from repeated exposure to similar events. Their silence is not passivity but survival. They have learned that speaking out or intervening could result in their own punishment or ostracism. In this society, public beatings function as a multifaceted institution, a deterrent against misbehaviour, a reaffirmation of hierarchy, and a communal ritual that instills fear and obedience. Law as we understand it does not exist here. Instead, the principle of might makes right governs daily interactions. Property disputes, personal slights, and even political disagreements often culminate in orchestrated violence carried out with precision and efficiency. Officials, if they exist, act more as arbiters of skill and endurance than as protectors of moral or legal codes. For an outsider, the normalization of such brutality is incomprehensible. You realize that survival in this environment demands not only physical strength but also psychological adaptation, a desensitization to suffering, a constant vigilance, and a readiness to assert dominance or flee at a moment's notice. Even minor infractions can escalate into public humiliation or life-threatening encounters, leaving no room for error or hesitation. The scene through the smoke-stained window offers an unvarnished view of the societal machinery, a society that thrives on the spectacle of pain, where empathy is a dangerous weakness, and where personal survival depends on understanding and navigating a complex network of power, intimidation, and respect. Every scream, every strike, every grunt of exertion is a reminder that life is precarious, fleeting, and merciless. In such a world, modern sensibilities, compassion, restraint, the rule of law, would not just be ignored, they would be liabilities. This is why you wouldn't survive life in ancient Greece. The lessons of history, when stripped of romanticized notions of philosophy and democracy, reveal a daily existence governed by raw force. Philosophers may debate virtue in ivory halls, but the streets tell a different story, one where survival is earned through resilience, cunning, and the willingness to inflict and endure suffering. To witness this is to confront the stark, uncomfortable truth that human societies, for much of their history, were built not on ideals, but on the practical realities of fear, dominance, and the ever-present threat of violence. Chapter 7. The gods are watching and they're angry. You wake to the haunting sound of ritualized wailing from the house next door, not the spontaneous crying of grief, but the formal mourning lamentations that ancient Greeks perform when death visits their community. Someone has died during the night, probably the fever victim whose condition you observed yesterday, and the family is fulfilling religious obligations that they believe are essential for proper treatment of the dead and maintenance of divine favour. The wailing continues for hours as more neighbours join the ceremonial mourning, their voices rising and falling in patterns learned from childhood and passed down through generations. This isn't just emotional expression. It's religious requirement that affects everyone standing with the gods who control life, death, and supernatural protection for individuals and communities. The complex mourning rituals you're witnessing represent only a tiny fraction of the religious obligations that dominate every aspect of ancient Greek life. Religion in ancient Athens isn't personal belief or private spiritual practice. It's a comprehensive social control system that governs behaviour, economics, politics, and relationships through supernatural authority that penetrates into every decision and activity. Melania notices your confusion about the mourning practices and decides to educate you about religious obligations that could determine your survival prospects in ancient Athens. What she explains would be completely alien to modern religious sensibilities, but represents orthodox ancient Greek theology that serious people accept as factual information about how the universe operates. The gods watch everything, she begins, with the matter-of-fact tone used for discussing practical household management. Every action, every word, every thought, every intention. They reward piety and punish impiety through direct intervention in human affairs that determines health, prosperity, safety, and success in all endeavours. This isn't metaphorical or philosophical religion. It's practical theology that treats gods as real entities who actively manage human affairs through supernatural intervention based on human behaviour. Ancient Greeks don't just believe in gods in the sense of hoping they exist. They expect immediate divine responses to human actions based on clearly understood spiritual principles. The religious system operates like cosmic transaction processing, where human behaviours generate divine reactions that affect material conditions in predictable ways. Proper worship brings health, wealth, fertility, military victory, and protection from disasters. Improper worship brings disease, poverty, sterility, military defeat, and vulnerability to natural catastrophes. This transactional relationship with divine powers requires constant attention to religious obligations that would overwhelm most modern religious practitioners. Daily household rituals performed at dawn and dusk, weekly community ceremonies at neighbourhood shrines, monthly festival obligations that require substantial time and financial contributions, and seasonal religious requirements that consume enormous amounts of resources. Your participation in these religious activities isn't optional social custom that you can politely decline. It's survival necessity enforced through community surveillance that monitors everyone's religious compliance. Religious deviance brings immediate social ostracism that can be equivalent to death sentence in societies without individual survival resources or institutional support systems. The religious obligations extend beyond personal piety to include complex family responsibilities, neighbourhood duties, occupational requirements, and civic functions that integrate religious observance with every other aspect of social organisation. You can't separate religious life from secular life because ancient Greek society doesn't recognise such distinctions. During your morning walk to the pottery workshop, you observe the comprehensive religious infrastructure that governs ancient Athenian life through supernatural technology, designed to maintain proper relationships with divine powers. Household shrines in every doorway protect families from malevolent spirits, while providing focus for daily worship activities. Neighbourhood temples on every street corner serve specific deities who control different aspects of local affairs, water spirits who manage well contamination, craft gods who determine workshop success, healing deities who influence illness outcomes. These aren't decorative religious architecture, they're functional spiritual installations that residents use constantly for practical supernatural services. Public altars throughout the city mark locations where community-wide religious activities occur during festivals, emergencies, and regular civic observances. Religious symbols integrated into buildings, streets, and public spaces create sacred geography that reminds residents of divine presence and supernatural authority that governs human activities. The religious infrastructure isn't maintained by specialized clergy operating independently from civil authority. It's community responsibility that requires participation from all residents, according to their social status and economic capabilities. Religious maintenance becomes civic duty that supplements taxation and military service as obligation to community welfare. Your failure to understand this religious technology marks you as dangerous to community spiritual security. People begin avoiding you not from personal dislike, but from fear that your religious incompetence might anger gods and bring divine punishment on everyone within proximity to your spiritual contamination. Religious pollution, miasma, represents one of ancient Greece's most serious concerns, because it can be transmitted through contact with impious individuals and affects entire communities through collective divine punishment. Your religious ignorance makes you a potential epidemic threat that could contaminate other people's relationships with protective deities. At the pottery workshop, Chrysos explains the religious requirements that govern craft production and could determine your economic survival through supernatural intervention in workshop activities. Every aspect of pottery work has religious dimensions that require proper observance to ensure divine favour for successful outcomes. Clay comes from Gaia, the earth goddess who controls all terrestrial materials. He instructs, while preparing work materials with ritualized gestures that honour divine powers. Fire belongs to Hephaestus, god of crafts and metallurgy, who determines kiln outcomes. Water serves Poseidon, lord of seas and springs, who affects clay consistency and vessel durability. These aren't abstract spiritual principles that provide psychological comfort. They're practical work requirements based on religious beliefs about divine control over craft processes. Pottery production involves specific prayers before handling materials, ritual offerings during each stage of work, and thanksgiving ceremonies after successful completion of projects. Neglecting these religious obligations could result in pottery failures that eliminate your employment through divine punishment for impiety. Clay might crack during drying, vessels might explode in kilns, glazes might fail to bond properly, or finished products might develop defects that make them unsaleable, all interpreted as evidence of insufficient religious observance. Ancient Greeks genuinely believed that craft success depends on maintaining proper relationships with patron deities who control the natural processes that determine workshop outcomes. Technical skill and hard work are necessary but insufficient for success without appropriate religious support from supernatural powers. The religious requirements extend beyond personal devotion to community obligations that affect entire neighborhoods through collective divine relationships. Your participation in local religious activities is monitored for orthodoxy that demonstrates proper integration into community spiritual life rather than individual piety that serves personal needs. Mistakes in ritual performance, failure to contribute appropriate offerings, or inappropriate behavior during ceremonies marks you as potential threat to collective divine favor that protects community from disasters, diseases, and military defeat. Religious freeloading threatens everyone's supernatural protection by reducing community piety levels below thresholds necessary for divine assistance. During midday religious observances that interrupt work schedules throughout the city, you attempt to participate in community rituals without understanding their theological significance or historical development. Your confusion becomes immediately obvious to other participants, who expect basic religious competence from community members. The priest conducting the ceremony notices your incompetence and makes pointed comments about foreign pollution, threatening community purity through inappropriate participation in sacred activities. Ancient Greek religious concepts of pollution and purification aren't metaphorical concerns. They're literal beliefs about spiritual contamination that can be transmitted through contact with impious individuals. Foreign spirits follow foreign people into sacred spaces, the priest declares while looking directly at you during community prayers. They corrupt our ceremonies with alien influences and anger our gods through improper ritual participation. Purification may be required to protect community spiritual health from contamination sources. This isn't theological prejudice against foreigners, it's practical religious concern based on beliefs about spiritual contamination that treat your presence as potential health hazard to community-divine relationships. The purification rituals he's suggesting could range from expensive ceremonies that would bankrupt you financially to permanent exile from religious community that would eliminate your social existence. The religious community's response to your incompetence reveals how ancient spiritual systems function as social control mechanisms that enforce conformity through supernatural authority. Religious deviance threatens not just individual salvation, but community welfare that depends on collective divine favor for protection from disasters. Ancient Greek religion operates through community consensus about proper spiritual behavior, rather than individual interpretation of divine requirements. Personal religious experience is less important than conformity to established community practices that maintain collective relationships with protective deities. The afternoon brings education about festival obligations that could consume your entire potential income while being socially mandatory for survival in religious community. Ancient Greek religious festivals aren't optional entertainment or personal spiritual retreats. They're required community participation that involves substantial economic contributions from all households. The upcoming Panathenea festival, Athens' most important religious celebration, requires contributions that would consume months of your potential earnings. Sacrificial animals for community offerings, special clothing for ritual participation, feast contributions for neighborhood celebrations, and religious equipment for household ceremonies that demonstrate proper devotion. These aren't voluntary donations based on personal generosity. They're social obligations enforced through community pressure that can result in complete ostracism for those who fail to contribute appropriately to religious activities. Religious freeloading brings immediate social exclusion that eliminates access to economic opportunities, legal protection, and community support. The economic burden of religious participation creates additional survival pressure for households already struggling with subsistence requirements. Religious obligations consume substantial portions of family income while being non-negotiable requirements for social acceptance that provides access to resources necessary for physical survival. Chrysos calculates his festival obligations while explaining the economic pressure that ancient religion places on working families. 2 months of pottery sales revenue for proper Panathenea participation, he estimates with resignation that reflects practical acceptance of financial burden. But failure to contribute means loss of clients, patron relationships, and neighborhood acceptance. Religious economy requires religious investment for secular survival. This calculation reveals the comprehensive economic integration of religious obligations with material survival requirements. Ancient households must choose between religious participation and physical necessities, but religious neglect eliminates the social relationships that provide access to economic opportunities that generate resources for physical survival. The religious economy operates through redistribution mechanisms that concentrate community resources in religious institutions, while providing supernatural services that members consider essential for material welfare. Religious contributions aren't charitable donations, but insurance payments that purchase divine protection for individuals and communities. During evening pottery work, you learn about occupational religious requirements that could affect your professional survival through supernatural intervention in craft activities. Every occupation has patron deities who must be honoured through specific rituals, offerings, and behavioural restrictions that govern work practices and determine professional success. Pottery work serves Athena, goddess of crafts and wisdom, and Hephaestus, god of fire and metalworking. Both deities require regular offerings proportional to workshop income, proper ritual behaviour during work activities, and ethical conduct that demonstrates respect for divine patronage of craft production. Violations of occupational religious requirements could result in divine punishment through pottery failures, workshop accidents, or economic disasters that destroy craft businesses through supernatural intervention. Ancient craftsmen genuinely believe that professional success depends on maintaining proper relationships with patron deities who control the technical processes that determine business outcomes. The occupational religion extends beyond individual piety to include guild obligations, community responsibilities, and civic duties that integrate craftwork with broader social religious observance. Professional identity cannot be separated from religious identity, because craft skills are considered divine gifts that require appropriate spiritual acknowledgement. Chapter 8. Disease is hunting you systematically. Your brief recovery from the combined assault of fever and medical treatment proves temporary and illusory. By your 8th dawn in ancient Athens, you're experiencing symptoms that would send you straight to a modern emergency room. Severe abdominal cramping, bloody diarrhea, projectile vomiting, and dehydration so severe that your skin tense when pinched. You've contracted dysentery, one of ancient Greece's most efficient and reliable killers. The bacterial invasion of your digestive system represents the inevitable outcome of consuming contaminated water, eating unwashed food prepared with dirty hands, and living in unsanitary conditions that would violate every modern health code. Your immune system, already weakened by malnutrition, stress, and previous illness, cannot mount effective resistance against pathogens that ancient Greeks managed through lifetime adaptation. The contaminated water you've been forced to drink despite knowing better, the questionable food you've consumed because starvation was the alternative, and the filthy living conditions you've endured because shelter was essential, have finally overwhelmed your modern body's ability to cope with ancient bacterial challenges. Melania recognizes the symptoms immediately, with the grim expertise of someone who's watched this disease kill neighbours, children, and family members regularly throughout her life. The bloody flux, she says with resignation that reflects practical experience rather than emotional detachment. It takes the young ones first, then the foreigners, then anyone weakened by other troubles. We'll do what we can, but the outcome belongs to the gods. What they can do is pitifully inadequate by modern medical standards, but represents the best healthcare available in ancient Greece. More bloodletting to balance the disturbed humours, herbal preparations that might help or might accelerate your death. Prayer tomorrow will bring new physical challenges that will push your failing body further beyond its limits. But tonight, as pain and exhaustion overwhelm your modern sensibilities, you can at least appreciate the remarkable achievement that your soft, inadequate body represents. Thousands of years of human progress that has made such softness possible. Your modern body isn't weak. It's adapted for a different kind of strength that ancient Greeks couldn't imagine. The question isn't whether ancient or modern human development is better, but whether you can survive long enough in ancient conditions to appreciate the historical distance between then and now. Based on your current physical deterioration, that survival window is closing rapidly. Chapter 9. Winter will freeze your corpse. November arrives in ancient Athens with temperatures that transform your previous understanding of cold from temporary inconvenience into active force attempting systematic murder through hypothermia, frostbite, and the gradual shutdown of human biological processes. Your modern conception of winter, uncomfortable weather that requires heavier clothing and higher heating bills, has absolutely no relationship to ancient cold, which represents existential threat that kills weak people methodically while testing community survival resources to their limits. The household's winter preparations reveal how marginal existence becomes during cold months, when every aspect of life must be reorganized around heat conservation, food preservation, and resource management decisions that determine who lives and who dies before spring returns. These aren't dramatic life or death choices made during crisis moments. They're calculated resource allocation decisions that families make preemptively to maximize survival chances for the most valuable household members. Your recovery from dysentery, such as it was, has left you weakened at precisely the wrong time for ancient winter survival. Cold weather doesn't accommodate illness recovery, physical vulnerability, or individual adaptation periods. Winter eliminates weak people first through environmental pressure that operates with the efficiency of natural selection, and you're definitely in the vulnerable category, despite surviving bacterial infection that killed Xanthi 2 weeks ago. The pottery workshop becomes completely uninhabitable as temperatures drop below levels that make clay work possible. Raw clay freezes solid, becoming impossible to shape or modify through normal techniques. The pottery wheels become useless equipment that can't function when materials are frozen. The kilns that provided workspace heating during autumn now consume too much fuel to operate continuously without bankrupting the household through fuel costs. Chrysos makes the economic calculation that every ancient craftsman faces during winter months. shut down production entirely to conserve resources for family survival, or continue working at reduced capacity while risking fuel exhaustion that could kill everyone through heating failure. The mathematics are brutal and unforgiving. Productive work that generates income during warm months becomes luxury that winter survival budgets cannot afford. He chooses survival over productivity, which means no workshop income for several months while household expenses increase dramatically due to winter conditions. Food costs multiply as fresh supplies become unavailable and preserved foods command premium prices. Fuel costs explode as heating needs intensify beyond summer requirements. Medical costs rise as cold-related illnesses proliferate through populations with reduced resistance. Winter economics become survival mathematics, where small miscalculations in resource allocation result in death through starvation, freezing, or disease that thrives in conditions of malnutrition and environmental stress. Ancient families must plan winter survival with the precision of military logistics because mistakes are fatal for individual members and potentially catastrophic for household continuation. The house itself provides minimal protection against temperatures that regularly drop below freezing throughout winter months. Mud brick walls without insulation offer little thermal resistance against cold penetration. Gaps around doors and windows allow continuous cold air circulation that eliminates heat retention. Dirt floors conduct ground cold directly into living spaces, creating thermal drains that counteract heating efforts. Ancient architecture that seemed primitive but adequate during summer months becomes actively dangerous during winter cold. Building techniques optimized for hot weather protection, thin walls, ventilation openings, elevated structures, work against heat retention that becomes essential for biological survival during cold seasons. Heating depends entirely on wood fires that consume enormous quantities of fuel, while providing minimal warmth beyond immediate proximity to flames. The small fires that seemed cozy during autumn evenings must now heat living spaces continuously, cook all food, provide light after dark, and maintain temperatures necessary for basic human biological function throughout winter months. Fuel consumption increases exponentially as outdoor temperatures drop, creating cost pressures that quickly become unaffordable for ordinary households operating on subsistence margins. A single winter requires more fuel than entire summer seasons, while income from productive work disappears due to weather-related workshop closures. Wood prices increase dramatically as demand exceeds supply throughout the city. Competition for fuel resources creates neighborhood conflicts that can escalate to violence between families desperate for heating materials. Tree cutting in surrounding areas strips forests bare, requiring longer transportation distances that increase fuel costs further. Ancient economic systems don't include price controls, supply management, or distribution assistance that could stabilize fuel markets during winter demand peaks. Fuel allocation operates through market mechanisms that favor wealthy households while eliminating access for families without adequate financial resources. The household implements heating conservation measures that would seem extreme by modern standards, but represent normal winter survival techniques for ancient families. Everyone sleeps in the same room to maximize shared body heat efficiency. Daily activities are scheduled around fire availability and fuel conservation requirements. Clothing is worn continuously in multiple layers for maximum insulation effectiveness. Bathing stops completely to prevent heat loss through wet skin and reduced body temperature. Personal hygiene becomes secondary consideration compared to heat conservation that maintains core body temperature above hypothermia thresholds. Modern cleanliness standards become luxury thinking that ancient winter survival cannot accommodate. These conservation measures provide only marginal protection against cold that would kill unprotected humans within hours of exposure. Ancient winter survival requires constant attention to heat management, fuel allocation, and resource conservation that modern heating systems handle automatically through technological solutions. Food preservation becomes a critical survival requirement as fresh supplies disappear completely and stored provisions must last through months of complete supply interruption. The household's winter food inventory includes dried grains, salted meats, preserved vegetables, fermented dairy products, and other stored foods that determine survival prospects until spring agriculture resumes. Ancient food preservation technology is primitive and unreliable compared to modern refrigeration, freezing, and chemical preservation methods. Grain storage attracts rodents that consume substantial portions of stored supplies, while contaminating remaining food with waste and disease. Meat preservation frequently fails due to inadequate salt curing or storage problems, resulting in spoilage that eliminates essential protein sources. Vegetable preservation provides minimal nutrition compared to fresh produce, creating vitamin deficiencies that reduce immune system function and increase susceptibility to winter illnesses. Preserved foods lose nutritional value through processing and storage, while winter dietary restrictions eliminate fresh sources of vitamins and minerals necessary for health maintenance. Food rationing begins immediately as winter starts, with portion sizes decreasing while caloric needs increase due to cold exposure stress. Meal frequency reduces from 2 meals daily to 1 substantial meal supplemented by small portions of preserved foods. The hungry season arrives when food costs are highest, and bodies need maximum fuel for heat generation. Your modern nutritional expectations, 3 meals daily plus snacks, beverage choices beyond water and wine, dietary variety that includes fresh fruits and vegetables, disappear completely during winter survival periods. Ancient winter eating becomes survival feeding designed to maintain minimum biological function, rather than provide satisfaction, variety, or nutritional optimization. The psychological impact of constant hunger combined with unrelenting cold creates despair that ancient Greeks combat through community rituals, religious observances, and storytelling traditions designed to maintain morale during extended survival crises. Winter entertainment focuses on psychological survival rather than recreational enjoyment. But these psychological support systems require energy that malnourished, cold-stressed people don't have available for activities beyond immediate survival needs. Depression becomes epidemic during winter months as people lose hope for spring survival while facing months of continued hardship without relief prospects. Suicide rates increase during winter seasons as individuals conclude that death is preferable to continued suffering, without reasonable hope for improvement. Ancient Greeks developed cultural mechanisms for managing winter despair, but these systems don't prevent individual psychological casualties that occur regularly during extended survival crises. Medical problems multiply exponentially as cold exposure weakens immune systems and increases susceptibility to diseases that thrive in winter conditions. Respiratory infections from breathing cold air without adequate heating, skin conditions from exposure and poor hygiene facilities, joint problems from constant muscular tension against cold stress. Frostbite affects extremities that aren't adequately protected by ancient clothing and heating systems. Hypothermia threatens constantly for people without access to adequate warming. Nutritional deficiencies from limited winter diets create health problems that persist into spring seasons and affect long-term survival prospects. The ancient medical system, inadequate during healthy seasons for treating routine illnesses, becomes completely useless during winter health crises when travel is dangerous and medical resources are exhausted by increased demand. Physicians can't maintain practices when patients can't reach them, and payment resources have been consumed by survival necessities. Folk remedies for winter illnesses require ingredients that aren't available during cold months, when plants are dormant and supplies are limited to preserved materials. Herbal treatments lose effectiveness through storage degradation, while fresh preparations become impossible due to seasonal unavailability of active ingredients. Disease spreads rapidly through households where people crowd together for warmth, while hygiene deteriorates due to water scarcity and heating limitations that make washing dangerous or impossible. What begins as individual cold-related illness quickly becomes household epidemic that could eliminate entire families through cumulative health failures. Social relationships deteriorate under survival pressure that forces impossible choices about resource allocation between competing family needs. Household members compete for food rations, fuel allocations, and warm sleeping positions near fires. Community cooperation breaks down as families prioritize their own survival over neighborhood mutual assistance. Violence increases during winter months as desperation drives people to steal resources, attack competitors for fuel or food, or settle disputes that were manageable during prosperous seasons when resources were adequate for conflict avoidance. Community social controls weaken when everyone is focused on immediate survival rather than long-term relationship maintenance. The winter economy collapses completely as productive activities become impossible due to weather conditions and resource conservation requirements. Trade stops when travel becomes dangerous and goods become scarce. Craft production halts when materials freeze, and workshops become uninhabitable. Agricultural work disappears when fields are frozen solid and livestock require maximum feed for winter survival. Income sources vanish while expenses multiply dramatically, creating economic crisis that forces families to make impossible decisions about which household members deserve continued resource support. The elderly, disabled, and economically unproductive face abandonment or active elimination as winter resources become inadequate for supporting everyone. Your position in Chrysos' household becomes particularly precarious as winter conditions intensify and resource scarcity increases pressure for household efficiency. As foreign worker with minimal skills, questionable productivity, and persistent health problems from recent illness, you represent expendable labor that consumes resources without generating equivalent value. Chrysos begins making pointed comments about food consumption, fuel usage, and space occupation that indicate your continued welcome depends on contributions to household survival that you're increasingly unable to provide. These aren't personal criticisms, they're practical warnings that your economic value must justify resource allocation that could otherwise support established family members. By midwinter, when stored food supplies are substantially depleted and fuel reserves are running dangerously low, the household begins implementing rationing policies that explicitly exclude you from equal resource allocation. Your food portions become smaller, while your access to warm sleeping areas becomes restricted, and your claim on heated spaces becomes secondary to family member needs. This isn't cruelty in modern humanitarian terms, it's mathematical survival management that prioritizes resource allocation based on survival probability and economic value to household continuation. Ancient families cannot afford sentimental resource allocation when winter survival margins are measured in calories and degrees of warmth. The household's winter survival calculations must account for spring recovery requirements that include seed purchase for next year's agricultural activities, equipment repair and replacement for resumed craft production, and resource reserves for economic activity that generates income after winter survival period ends. Families that barely survive winter often can't afford spring recovery investments, creating poverty cycles that trap households in subsistence, living without prospects for economic improvement. Winter survival without spring preparation capacity represents short-term success that guarantees long-term failure through inability to resume productive activities. As the coldest months arrive and outside temperatures drop to levels that would kill exposed humans within minutes, you realize that ancient winter survival requires community integration and social support that you never achieved during warmer seasons when such relationships seemed less critical for immediate survival. Family members support each other through kinship obligations that include resource sharing, mutual care during illness, and collective labor for household maintenance. Neighbors share fuel and food through reciprocal relationships developed over years of mutual assistance. Religious communities provide emergency support through spiritual networks that organize collective welfare activities. You have none of these essential social connections. Your survival depends entirely on Chrysos' individual charity, which has clear limits that winter resource scarcity makes brutally apparent. When families must choose between supporting established members or accommodating outsiders, charity becomes luxury that subsistence survival cannot afford. The approaching end of winter brings no relief, because spring recovery requires resources for agricultural resumption, craft production restart, and equipment maintenance that winter survival has exhausted. Families that survive winter often lack resources for spring economic revival, creating extended hardship that continues beyond cold weather resolution. Spring planting requires seed purchase when grain reserves have been consumed for winter survival. Workshop resumption requires material purchase when winter fuel consumption has eliminated purchasing power. Equipment repair requires resource investment when winter survival has consumed all available assets. Ancient seasonal cycles create continuous survival challenges that prevent economic stability and resource accumulation for most families. Winter survival eliminates spring preparation resources, while spring recovery prevents winter preparation investment, creating cycles of crisis management without opportunities for long-term security development. As you huddle near the dying embers of what might be your last fire, listening to wind penetrating through wall gaps, while feeling hunger that has become your constant companion throughout winter months, You understand that ancient winter represents a fundamentally different survival challenge from modern cold weather experience. Modern winter is inconvenience managed through technological solutions: central heating, insulated clothing, refrigerated food storage, reliable fuel supplies, and medical care for cold-related health problems. Ancient winter is survival crisis that systematically eliminates vulnerable people while testing community bonds through resource scarcity that forces impossible moral choices. You probably won't survive this winter, not through dramatic accident or acute medical crisis, but through slow attrition that gradually weakens your body until minor additional stress, a cold draft, missed meal, small injury, provides final impetus toward death through accumulated system failures. Winter in ancient Greece operates a seasonal elimination mechanism that removes people who can't maintain minimum biological function under environmental stress that continues for months without relief. It's natural selection, operating through environmental pressure that modern humans have forgotten, thanks to heating technology and food distribution systems. The cold doesn't discriminate based on nationality, intelligence, or potential contributions to human knowledge. It kills anyone without adequate resources for fuel, food, shelter, and medical care. Resources that depend entirely on social relationships and community integration that you never developed because you never understood their life or death importance. As you drift toward what might be final sleep, cold penetrating through inadequate clothing while hunger gnaws at your diminishing body mass, you realize that surviving ancient winter requires more than physical endurance or individual determination. It requires social integration, economic value, and community investment that provide access to collective resources necessary for survival during extended crisis periods. Winter will kill you not through dramatic exposure incident, but through gradual resource exhaustion that makes survival mathematically impossible when heating costs exceed income capacity, food requirements exceed supply availability, and medical needs exceed treatment accessibility. Everyone will understand your death as natural consequence of inadequate social preparation, rather than tragic loss of individual potential. The seasonal mortality that seems cruel from modern humanitarian perspectives represents practical resource management that ancient communities developed for survival under environmental conditions that regularly exceeded individual survival capacity. Winter elimination serves community welfare by concentrating limited resources among people most likely to contribute to collective survival after crisis periods end. Your modern body, optimized for technological assistance, cannot generate enough heat for ancient winter survival without external heating that consumes resources you don't possess. Your modern social expectations focused on individual rights and personal autonomy prevented development of community relationships that provide collective survival support during crisis periods. Tomorrow, assuming you survive the night, will bring continued deterioration as winter conditions intensify and your physical reserves become further depleted through cold exposure and nutritional inadequacy. Each day becomes harder than the previous as accumulated stress reduces your survival capacity, while environmental demands remain constant. The mathematical progression toward death becomes inexorable once winter resource requirements exceed individual capacity for meeting survival needs through available community support systems. Ancient winter kills through systematic resource depletion that modern humans avoid through technological solutions and social institutions that won't exist for thousands of years. Your last conscious thought might be gratitude for modern heating systems that make such survival calculations unnecessary, followed by recognition that winter hardship creates human resilience and community cooperation that modern comfort has made unnecessary but also impossible to develop when crisis situations require collective survival skills. Ancient Greeks who survive winter develop capabilities for community cooperation, resource management, and crisis planning that enable remarkable achievements during favorable seasons. But these capabilities require survival experiences that modern humans cannot obtain without risking death from environmental challenges that technological civilization has eliminated. Winter in ancient Athens represents both human achievement in developing survival technologies for impossible conditions and human tragedy in the individual casualties that such survival requires. Your death, should it occur, represents the price that pre-technological humans paid for community survival during environmental crises that modern heating eliminates as survival challenges. The cold claims consciousness gradually, providing time for final reflection on the vast distance between ancient struggle and modern security. Winter hardship that seems romantic in historical accounts reveals itself as a systematic elimination process that removes anyone without adequate resources for extended survival during environmental crisis that continues for months. Sleep comes as biological shutdown begins, body temperature dropping below thresholds necessary for maintaining consciousness, while environmental cold continues its patient work of systematic human elimination. Ancient winter doesn't hurry its killing. It works methodically until individual biological systems can no longer maintain function against environmental pressure that exceeds technological assistance. Chapter 10. The economy will eliminate you systematically. By the time spring limps into ancient Athens, assuming you somehow survived winter through charity, luck, and the sheer biological stubbornness that occasionally allows human bodies to endure more punishment than seems possible, you discover that ancient Greek economics operate on principles that would horrify modern workers, consumers, and policymakers. There is no job security beyond daily productivity, no unemployment insurance for economic displacement, no minimum wage guarantees for basic survival, no workplace safety regulations for health protection, no retirement planning for old age security, and absolutely no social safety net for individual economic failure. Your survival depends entirely and immediately on your ability to generate economic value that exceeds your consumption costs in systems designed to eliminate people who can't contribute productively to community economic welfare. This isn't temporary hardship during economic adjustment periods. It's permanent condition where individual economic failure means death through starvation, exposure, or social abandonment. The pottery workshop reopens with severely reduced capacity because winter has damaged equipment through freezing temperatures, depleted material supplies that weren't adequately protected from weather, and eliminated several potential workers who didn't survive cold months. Chrysos faces reconstruction costs that could bankrupt the household if spring production doesn't generate sufficient income to replace winter losses and prepare for next winter's survival requirements. Your position as workshop assistant remains precarious because spring labour requirements demand skills you still haven't developed during your months of struggle in ancient Athens. You can perform basic material preparation with reduced efficiency, but you can't operate potter's wheels effectively, manage kiln firing safely, or create finished products that generate income adequate for justifying your continued employment. Ancient economies don't support training programs, apprenticeship wage subsidies, or skill development investments that modern employment systems consider normal business expenses. Workers must contribute productive value immediately upon hiring or find alternative survival strategies that don't depend on employer charity during learning periods. Chrysos can't afford to subsidize your continued education when workshop resources are desperately needed for immediate income generation to recover from winter losses. Every day spent training you is productive capacity lost that could generate revenue through work performed by competent craftsmen who don't require supervision and instruction. The economic calculations that determine your survival become brutally explicit as spring activities resume throughout Athens. Raw materials cost specific amounts that must be recovered through sales revenue, or the workshop operates at loss that eliminates household resources. Labour time has opportunity costs that must generate equivalent returns, or economic efficiency suffers. Workshop space and equipment represent capital investments that must produce profitable outcomes or assets are wasted. Your labour contribution consistently generates less value than it consumes in food costs, housing expenses, supervision time, and material waste from mistakes during learning processes. Modern businesses might accept such losses during employee training periods as investment in future productivity, but ancient workshops operating on subsistence margins can't afford workers who reduce overall household economic viability. The economic pressure created by your continued inadequacy becomes a mathematical problem that household management must solve through resource reallocation or worker replacement. Sentiment, personal relationships, and humanitarian considerations cannot override economic requirements that determine family survival prospects. Chrysos begins requiring specific productivity quotas that measure your daily output against established standards for competent workers. Missing these targets results in reduced food portions that weaken your physical condition and create downward performance spirals. Meeting targets becomes increasingly difficult as malnutrition affects your strength, coordination, and cognitive function. The employment relationship itself lacks all modern protections that contemporary workers consider fundamental rights guaranteed by law and social contract. No written agreements specify wages, working conditions, termination procedures, or dispute resolution mechanisms. No legal frameworks protect workers from arbitrary dismissal, unsafe working conditions, wage theft, or discriminatory treatment based on social status. Employment exists entirely at employer discretion, without institutional oversight, worker advocacy systems, or regulatory enforcement that could protect individual workers from economic exploitation. Ancient labour relations operate through personal relationships and community pressure, rather than legal rights and institutional protections. You discover that changing employment isn't a realistic option, because craft economies operate through family networks, guild connections and patron relationships that systematically exclude outsiders without established community ties. Available positions require recommendations from established community members who have no incentive to advocate for your qualifications or vouch for your reliability. Alternative economic activities that might provide subsistence income are already saturated by people with superior local knowledge, established client relationships, and community connections that provide competitive advantages. Street vending requires understanding of neighbourhood commerce patterns, seasonal demand cycles, and supplier relationships that take years to develop. Day labour opportunities require physical capabilities that your modern body still hasn't developed and may never achieve given the accumulated damage from malnutrition, illness, and inappropriate medical treatment. Construction work demands specialised skills with ancient tools and building techniques that differ completely from modern construction knowledge. Service work, food preparation, cleaning, transportation, exists primarily within household structures that employ family members and slaves, rather than hiring independent contractors from outside communities. Wealthy families maintain permanent household staff through direct ownership or long-term personal relationships, rather than contracting temporary services. Agricultural work, which employs most ancient Greeks, requires land access that you don't have, and agricultural knowledge that you haven't developed through lifetime rural experience. Ancient farming isn't simple manual labour that anyone can perform. It's complex technical work requiring understanding of crops, seasons, soil management, animal husbandry, and weather patterns developed through generations of agricultural tradition. Military service, theoretically available to physically capable men, requires citizenship status that you lack, and equipment purchases that you can't afford on subsistence income. Ancient armies aren't professional forces that provide training, equipment, and steady wages. They're citizen militias where participants must supply personal weapons and armour, while serving without compensation during campaign periods. Trade and commerce require starting capital, business relationships, and market knowledge that represent investments beyond your economic reach. Ancient commercial systems don't provide business loans, startup assistance, or entrepreneurial education that modern small business development programs offer to aspiring merchants. Commercial success depends on understanding complex networks of suppliers, customers, competitors, and regulatory requirements that take years to master. Foreign traders succeed through ethnic community connections that provide market intelligence, credit arrangements, and dispute resolution mechanisms unavailable to isolated individuals. Craft specialization in metalworking, textiles, leather production, or construction requires specialized tools, technical training, and guild membership that represent economic investments far beyond your resources. Master craftsmen don't accept apprentices without substantial entry payments that guarantee training completion and family connections that ensure social reliability. The apprenticeship system serves established families by providing economic opportunities for their children, while excluding outsiders who might compete for limited professional positions. Ancient craft guilds function as family business networks rather than open professional associations that welcome qualified applicants regardless of social background. The service economy that employs substantial portions of modern populations, food preparation, cleaning, transportation, entertainment, education, healthcare, exists primarily within household structures rather than as independent commercial activities that hire workers from general labour markets. Professional services are provided by household members, slaves, or specialised craftsmen with established community positions. Religious occupations require theological training, community recognition, and institutional affiliations that you couldn't develop as outsider with questionable spiritual qualifications and foreign origins. Ancient priesthoods aren't career choices available through individual vocational decision-making. They're hereditary positions or community selections based on family connections and lifelong religious participation. Educational work doesn't exist as distinct employment category because teaching happens within families for basic skills, craft workshops for professional training, or wealthy households that maintain private tutors for children's education. Public education systems that employ professional teachers represent social institutions that won't be developed for thousands of years. Legal services require citizenship status for court access, formal training in rhetorical techniques, and community connections that mark legal practitioners as social insiders rather than hired professionals available to general public. Ancient legal systems don't recognize professional advocacy as distinct occupational category, separate from personal relationships and social obligations. Entertainment work, music, theatre, athletics, requires training from childhood and community acceptance that identifies performers as skilled artists rather than desperate workers seeking income alternatives. Cultural productions emerge from established social institutions and religious festivals rather than commercial entertainment industries that hire performers based on talent and market demand. As spring progresses into summer and your economic position becomes increasingly desperate, you realize that ancient Greek economics assumes social integration that you never achieved during your residence in Athens. Economic opportunities flow through kinship networks, neighborhood relationships, religious affiliations, and patron connections that provide access to resources, information, and opportunities. Without these essential social relationships, you're economically invisible in systems that don't recognize individual merit, personal qualifications, or potential contributions separate from community acceptance and social reliability. Your modern skills, literacy, numeracy, analytical thinking, problem-solving abilities, have no market value in economies that prioritize social connections over technical competence. The seasonal employment that might provide temporary income during busy agricultural or commercial periods requires physical capabilities that your modern body still hasn't developed despite months of ancient living. Harvest work demands strength and endurance that exhaust you within hours of beginning. Construction projects require specialized knowledge of ancient building techniques that differ completely from modern construction methods. Transportation work involves handling animals, horses, mules, oxen, and operating vehicles, carts, boats, pack trains, that represent technologies you don't understand and can't operate safely. Ancient transportation systems depend on knowledge of animal behavior, route conditions, weather patterns, and seasonal timing that take years of experience to master. By late summer, as economic pressure on Chrysos' household intensifies, due to accumulated debts from winter survival, and reduced income from your continued inefficiency, the inevitable occurs. Your employer makes the calculation that you've been dreading since your arrival. Your labour contribution doesn't justify continued resource investment, and household survival requires eliminating unproductive expenses. The dismissal happens without drama, formal procedures, or advance notice. Chrysos simply stops providing food and requests that you find alternative accommodations. This isn't personal rejection or emotional decision, it's business calculation based on mathematical analysis of household economic viability during challenging seasonal periods. Modern employment termination involves complex legal procedures, severance payments, unemployment benefits, job placement assistance, and transition support designed to soften economic displacement effects. Ancient employment termination is immediate expulsion from economic participation without institutional support for alternative survival arrangements. Your transition from housed worker to homeless unemployed happens instantly because ancient economies don't provide unemployment benefits, job placement services, retraining programs, or social assistance that modern displaced workers expect during employment transitions. You're simply expelled from economic system without resources or support for developing alternative survival strategies. Homelessness in ancient Athens means immediate exposure to weather extremes, criminal violence, and disease transmission without physical shelter that protected you during employment. Street living exposes you to temperature variations that could cause death through exposure, criminal assault from people who prey on vulnerable individuals, and social persecution from communities that consider homelessness evidence of moral failure. Food access becomes a critical survival problem without household membership or independent income sources. Ancient cities don't maintain food banks, soup kitchens, charitable feeding programs, or welfare assistance that provide nutritional support to economically displaced persons. You must obtain food through begging, theft, or scavenging from waste sources, all strategies that carry significant risks and provide inadequate nutrition. The begging economy that supports some homeless individuals requires social skills, community knowledge, and psychological manipulation abilities that you haven't developed. Successful beggars understand neighborhood patterns, religious obligations, seasonal variations, and individual psychology that influences charitable giving decisions. Begging also requires understanding of social hierarchies, legal restrictions, and territorial arrangements that govern street economics. Established beggars control profitable locations and may violently exclude newcomers who threaten their economic territories. Amateur begging often results in conflict with professional beggars who have invested years in developing clientele and strategic positions. Theft provides temporary resource access, but carries punishment risks that could result in death, permanent disability, or enslavement through legal retaliation. Ancient justice systems impose severe physical punishments for property crimes, and community vigilante justice often involves immediate violent response without legal procedures. Even successful theft requires knowledge of local crime patterns, fence networks for disposing of stolen goods, and criminal subcultures that provide protection from legal enforcement. Amateur theft usually results in capture and punishment, because criminal success requires specialized knowledge and community connections that outsiders don't possess. Scavenging from waste sources exposes you to contaminated food that could cause fatal illness, dangerous materials that could cause injury, and territorial conflicts with other desperate individuals competing for limited discarded resources. Ancient waste management doesn't separate hazardous materials from organic waste that might provide emergency nutrition. Scavenging also carries social stigma that eliminates any remaining prospects for legitimate employment or community acceptance. People who resort to scavenging are considered socially dead, beneath normal human consideration and outside community moral obligations for assistance or protection. Chapter 11. Your words are meaningless. You think you know ancient Greek? The cruel revelation that destroys this illusion comes during your desperate attempts to find work, shelter, or charity after your economic elimination from Chrysos' household. Your academic understanding of ancient Greek, whether from university courses, classical literature study, or historical documentation research, bears absolutely no relationship to the living language that determines survival in ancient Athens through communication competence that you utterly lack. The ancient Greek you encounter in daily survival situations isn't the polished literary language of Plato's philosophical dialogues or Sophocles' dramatic masterpieces that scholars study in controlled academic environments. It's rapid, colloquial, highly dialectical speech filled with local slang, occupational jargon, cultural references, and social implications that require lifetime immersion in ancient Athenian society to understand and use effectively. Your first catastrophic communication failure occurs while attempting to negotiate with a workshop owner for temporary labour during pottery loading operations. You approach Damocles, whose workshop produces ceramic vessels for local taverns, and attempt to explain your availability for manual labour using carefully constructed classical Greek that sounds formal and artificial to native speakers. Greetings, respected craftsman. I seek temporary employment in your workshop, offering my labour services in exchange for modest compensation that would enable my survival during current economic difficulties, you say, using grammatically correct but socially inappropriate language that immediately identifies you as a linguistic outsider. Damocles stares at you with confusion followed by suspicion. Your formal speech patterns, perfect grammar, and elaborate vocabulary mark you as someone attempting linguistic deception. Either a spy from rival workshops, an educated person fallen from high social status under mysterious circumstances, or a foreign agent with hidden motives for infiltrating Athenian commercial activities. Where do you learn to talk like that, he demands, using rapid colloquial Greek that your academic training barely helps you understand? Sound like temple priest or philosopher trying to fool honest workers? What's your real purpose here? Who sent you to spy on my business operations? The accusation reveals how completely your academic Greek education has failed to prepare you for functional communication in ancient social contexts. Classical Greek taught in modern universities represents literary language used by educated elites for written works, not spoken language used by ordinary people for daily communication. Your pronunciation, based on medieval traditions and Renaissance scholarship reconstructions, sounds foreign and artificial to native speakers who learned spoken Greek through childhood immersion in authentic linguistic environments. Academic pronunciation systems represent educated guesswork about ancient speech patterns, rather than actual knowledge of how ancient Greeks spoke their language. Ancient Greek phonology includes sounds that don't exist in modern languages and sound combinations that require vocal training from early childhood. Your modern vocal apparatus, conditioned for contemporary language sounds, simply cannot produce authentic ancient Greek speech patterns that native speakers recognize as legitimate communication rather than foreign approximation. The vocabulary you learned from classical texts represents literary register used by educated writers for formal composition, not working-class language used by craftsmen, merchants, and labourers for practical communication. The semantic range of common words differs significantly between literary and colloquial usage, creating constant misunderstanding when you attempt to use learned vocabulary in inappropriate social contexts. Worse still, ancient Greek contains numerous regional dialects that differ substantially in vocabulary, grammar, and pronunciation patterns. Athenian Greek uses different linguistic forms than Spartan Greek, Corinthian Greek, Theban Greek, or other regional variants. Your academic ancient Greek represents no specific dialect, while attempting to combine features from multiple regional and temporal variations. The social context of language use in ancient Athens involves complex patterns of address, deference markers, and status indicators that govern acceptable communication between different social classes, age groups, and professional categories. Your egalitarian modern communication style violates hierarchical linguistic expectations and could result in serious social consequences. Speaking incorrectly to social superiors might be interpreted as deliberate insult requiring violent response to maintain honour and social order. Using inappropriate familiarity with social equals could damage potential relationship development that depends on proper linguistic courtesy. Failing to show adequate deference to religious authorities through language might mark you as impious threat to community spiritual welfare. Your attempts to buy food at street markets create linguistic disasters that eliminate your access to essential resources, while marking you as dangerous outsider who doesn't belong in Athenian commercial society. Market transactions require understanding of specialized commercial vocabulary, bargaining protocols, and quality assessment terminology that differs completely from literary Greek vocabulary. I wish to purchase bread for immediate consumption, you tell a bakery vendor, using formal language that sounds pretentious and suspicious in commercial contexts where simple, direct communication is expected for efficient business transactions. The vendor responds in rapid market Greek that includes pricing terminology, quality descriptions, and payment procedures using vocabulary that doesn't appear in classical literary texts. Got fresh barley loaves baked this morning, wheat loaves if you got extra coin, yesterday's bread at half price if you're counting a bowls, take it or leave it because I got other customers waiting. You understand perhaps half of this commercial communication because market vocabulary, measurement systems, and pricing conventions represent specialized knowledge that takes years of marketplace experience to master. Your confusion is obvious and creates suspicion about your intentions and social background. Religious language presents particularly dangerous communication challenges because ritual speech uses archaic vocabulary, specialized grammatical structures, and traditional pronunciation patterns that differ significantly from everyday colloquial Greek. Your inability to participate properly in religious communication marks you as spiritually dangerous outsider who threatens community-divine relationships. During neighborhood religious ceremonies, your struggle with ritual responses becomes immediately apparent to other participants, who expect basic religious, linguistic competence from community members. Mispronouncing sacred names could anger deities according to ancient religious beliefs. Using incorrect grammatical forms might invalidate religious efficacy and endanger community spiritual welfare. Legal language, essential for any interactions with Athenian justice systems, uses highly technical vocabulary and formal structures designed to specify precise meanings in contractual and procedural contexts. Your inability to understand or use legal Greek eliminates your access to legal protections and dispute resolution mechanisms. If someone cheats, assaults, or robs you, your inability to communicate effectively with legal authorities means that grievances can't be properly presented, evidence can't be adequately explained, and legal procedures can't be correctly followed. Ancient legal systems don't provide translators, simplified communication, or accommodation for people with language limitations. Commercial language requires mastery of trade terminology, measurement systems, quality assessment vocabulary, and negotiation phrases that govern economic transactions throughout ancient Mediterranean commerce. Your linguistic inadequacy makes you vulnerable to fraud, overcharging, contract violations, and commercial exploitation. Market haggling involves rapid verbal exchanges using specialized vocabulary for describing product quality, comparing prices, assessing value, and negotiating terms that native speakers develop through lifetime participation in commercial culture. Your inability to engage in proper commercial communication eliminates your access to fair economic treatment. Medical language presents life-threatening communication barriers. When illness requires interaction with physicians whose diagnostic procedures depend on precise description of symptoms, medical history, and treatment responses. Your inability to communicate effectively with medical practitioners could result in misdiagnosis and potentially lethal treatment errors. Ancient physicians asked detailed questions about symptom onset, pain characteristics, digestive patterns, sleep quality, and previous health experiences using medical vocabulary that doesn't appear in literary texts. Your confused or inappropriate responses could lead to incorrect diagnosis and harmful treatment based on miscommunication rather than accurate medical assessment. Social language involves understanding of gossip patterns, humour structures, storytelling conventions, and informal communication styles that create community bonds and establish personal relationships within neighbourhood networks. Your inability to participate in casual social communication isolates you from support systems that could provide crucial assistance during emergencies. Chapter 12. Why you failed completely. As you lie dying in a doorway somewhere in ancient Athens, cold penetrating your emaciated body, hunger gnawing at organs that have begun consuming themselves for survival, disease ravaging systems that no longer function effectively, you have time for final reflection on exactly why your modern human existence proved so catastrophically unsuited for ancient Greek survival. It wasn't any single factor that killed you, though each could have been fatal alone. It was the complete systematic mismatch between modern human capabilities and ancient survival requirements that created multiple simultaneous failures across every domain of human existence. Your death isn't dramatic or heroic. There's no noble final speech about human dignity, no philosophical insights about the nature of existence, no meaningful contribution to human knowledge or cultural development. You're simply another nameless foreign beggar who couldn't adapt to ancient conditions, dying quietly from accumulated physical deterioration while the city continues its daily activities around your failing body. The physical challenges defeated you first, but they were only the beginning of your comprehensive failure to meet ancient survival requirements. Your modern body, optimized for controlled environments and technological assistance, couldn't handle basic physical demands of ancient life that native Greeks managed effortlessly. Contaminated water destroyed your digestive system through bacterial infections that your modern immune system couldn't resist. Manual labour injured your soft hands and weak spine beyond recovery capacity. Malnutrition weakened your physiological reserves until minor illnesses became life-threatening conditions. Cold exposure during winter pushed your cardiovascular system past sustainable limits. Ancient Greeks developed physical capabilities through evolutionary pressure and lifetime conditioning that created bodies specifically adapted for ancient survival challenges. Your modern physiology represents thousands of years of human development that prioritize different survival requirements entirely. But physical failure alone wouldn't have killed you if you had achieved social integration that provides community support during individual crises. The social challenges proved equally lethal through systematic exclusion from networks that make survival possible for people with recognized social positions. Ancient Greek society operates through hierarchies and relationships that you never understood or successfully navigated. Without family connections, citizenship status, patron relationships, guild memberships, or religious affiliations, you remain permanently outside social systems that provide essential resources and opportunities. Your modern concepts of individual merit, personal achievement, and social mobility simply don't exist in ancient contexts, where social position determines access to survival resources. Ancient societies prioritize group stability over individual advancement because collective welfare requires predictable social organization. The economic challenges eliminated you through mathematical calculations that treated your survival as a resource allocation problem, rather than humanitarian concern. Your labor contribution never generated sufficient value to justify continued investment in your maintenance and training. Ancient economies operate on subsistence margins that can't support unproductive members regardless of their potential, personal circumstances, or individual qualifications. Economic efficiency requires eliminating people who consume more resources than they produce, and you consistently fail to meet productivity requirements. Your modern skills, literacy, analytical thinking, technological competence, had no market value in economies that prioritize social relationships over technical capabilities. Economic opportunities flowed through community connections rather than individual merit or professional qualifications. Medical treatment actively harmed you through interventions based on theoretical frameworks that bore no relationship to actual disease processes. Ancient physicians applied sophisticated logical reasoning to fundamentally incorrect assumptions about human physiology, creating systematic medical torture disguised as therapeutic care. Bloodletting, purging, and toxic herbal preparations weakened your already compromised health while consuming resources that might have supported natural recovery processes. Ancient medicine killed more patients than it cured through confident application of theories that were elaborate wrong about biological mechanisms. Your modern medical knowledge made ancient healthcare more psychologically devastating because you understood exactly how easily your conditions could be treated with interventions that wouldn't exist for thousands of years. Scientific understanding without technological capability created intellectual torture that ancient patients avoided through ignorance. Religious requirements isolated you because you couldn't authentically participate in belief systems that demanded genuine faith in divine intervention. Ancient Greek religion provided social control and community integration through supernatural authority that penetrated every aspect of daily life. Your modern skepticism and scientific worldview made religious participation psychologically impossible, despite understanding its social necessity for survival. Religious authenticity requirements excluded people who couldn't demonstrate genuine belief in gods, who actively managed human affairs through immediate supernatural intervention. Religious obligations consumed substantial economic resources while being non-negotiable requirements for social acceptance. Ancient households allocated significant portions of income to religious activities that provided community membership essential for accessing economic opportunities and social support. Violence threatened you constantly because ancient societies used brutality as normal method for conflict resolution, social control, and individual expression. Your modern psychological conditioning for peaceful conflict resolution made you unsuitable for environments where violence was routine and expected. Ancient Greeks accepted violence as a legitimate tool for protecting interests, maintaining honor, and resolving disputes that couldn't be handled through negotiation or legal procedures. Personal safety depended on fighting capability, community connections, and understanding of violence codes that regulated when and how brutality was socially appropriate. Your modern moral frameworks that condemn violence as inherently wrong prevented adaptation to social systems, where violence served essential functions that modern institutions handle through peaceful mechanisms. Pacifistic inclinations marked you for victimization by people who used violence effectively for personal advancement. Disease hunted you systematically because ancient urban environments created ideal conditions for pathogen transmission while lacking effective treatment methods. Your modern immune system, weakened by stress and malnutrition, couldn't resist bacterial and viral infections that ancient Greeks handled through lifetime adaptation. Every contaminated meal, polluted water source, and unsanitary living condition exposed you to potentially fatal pathogens that accumulated in your system until immune defenses collapsed completely. Ancient disease management focused on supernatural explanations rather than sanitation improvements that could prevent transmission. Winter defeated you because ancient heating, shelter, and food preservation technologies couldn't maintain human biological functions during extended cold periods. Your modern cold weather experience provided no preparation for survival challenges that required community resources and social integration. Ancient winter survival demanded collective cooperation, resource sharing, and mutual support that you never developed during warmer seasons when such relationships seemed less critical. Winter eliminated vulnerable people through environmental pressure that modern heating systems make irrelevant. Language barriers prevented effective communication in all social contexts, where survival depended on successful interaction with community members. Your academic ancient Greek bore no relationship to functional street language required for work instructions, commercial negotiations, and social integration. Communication failures compounded every other survival challenge by preventing access to information, assistance, and opportunities that could have extended your life in ancient conditions. Linguistic competence represented fundamental requirement for social participation that academic language study couldn't provide. The cumulative effect of these failures created a downward spiral that made recovery impossible once systematic elimination began. Physical weakness led to economic uselessness, which caused social exclusion, which prevented access to medical care, which worsened physical condition, creating cycles of deterioration that modern social safety nets prevent through institutional support. Your modern knowledge proved useless because ancient survival requires different competencies entirely. Scientific understanding couldn't help without technology to implement solutions. Historical knowledge couldn't help because you were living history rather than studying it. Analytical skills couldn't help because ancient problems required social rather than intellectual solutions. The psychological burden of understanding your situation made survival more difficult because you knew that death was preventable by standards that wouldn't exist for millennia. Modern medical knowledge made ancient illness more terrifying. Historical awareness made social injustice more frustrating. Scientific understanding made religious requirements more psychologically impossible. Your modern values, individualism, egalitarianism, scientific rationality, humanitarian concern, conflicted with ancient survival requirements at fundamental levels. Ancient societies required accepting hierarchy, embracing supernatural explanations, subordinating individual needs to collective welfare, and prioritizing group survival over individual rights. The inability to internalize ancient values marked you as psychologically unsuitable for social integration that determines access to resources and opportunities. Cultural adaptation requires genuine belief changes that modern education makes difficult or impossible to achieve. Most fundamentally, you failed because modern humans are adapted for technological civilization rather than subsistence survival. Thousands of years of social development have created human beings who can't survive in conditions that created human civilization originally. Your death represents historical distance between ancient and modern human experience that extends beyond technological differences to encompass fundamental changes in human capabilities, social organization, and survival strategies. You're not just separated from ancient Greeks by time, you're separated by evolutionary adaptations that make their world genuinely alien. The tragedy isn't personal inadequacy or moral failure, it's historical transformation that has created modern humans who possess capabilities for technological environments while lacking abilities for subsistence survival. Modern comfort comes at cost of survival skills that were once essential for human existence. Ancient Greeks would face similar challenges if transported to modern technological civilization. Their social expectations, economic assumptions, and survival strategies would prove equally maladaptive for contemporary requirements that emphasize cognitive skills over physical endurance, individual achievement over community integration. But understanding why you failed provides insight into both ancient achievements and modern vulnerabilities. Ancient Greeks survived conditions that would kill most contemporary humans, while accepting levels of suffering, inequality, and mortality that modern societies consider unacceptable. Your failure illuminates remarkable achievement represented by modern technological civilization that has eliminated ancient survival challenges while creating new forms of human capability and social organization. The safety, health, prosperity, and individual freedom that contemporary humans expect required millennia of accumulated knowledge and institutional development. It also reveals modern dependencies on technological systems and social institutions that most people don't understand or appreciate. Modern survival depends entirely on infrastructure and technologies that could disappear through natural disaster, economic collapse, or social breakdown, leaving modern humans as helpless as you proved in ancient conditions. The question isn't whether ancient or modern life represents superior human achievement. Both involve trade-offs between different forms of capability and welfare. Ancient Greeks possessed survival skills that modern humans have lost, while modern humans possess technological capabilities that ancient Greeks couldn't imagine. Final reflection: the bridge between worlds. As this journey through ancient Athens draws to a close, and you prepare to return to the comfort of your modern existence, take a moment to consider what this impossible voyage has revealed about the extraordinary distance humanity has travelled across the centuries. Your failure to survive in ancient Greece wasn't a personal shortcoming. It was evidence of one of the most remarkable transformations in human history. The soft hands that couldn't handle clay work represent thousands of years of technological progress that eliminated the need for such calluses. The immune system that couldn't resist ancient pathogens reflects medical advances that conquered diseases once considered divine punishment. The social expectations that clashed with ancient hierarchies demonstrate moral evolution that expanded concepts of human dignity beyond what ancient minds could comprehend. Every aspect of your ancient failure illuminates a corresponding modern success. You couldn't drink contaminated water because you've never had to. Municipal water treatment represents centuries of accumulated knowledge about chemistry, biology, and public health. You couldn't sleep on dirt floors because ergonomic science has taught us how proper rest affects human performance and well-being. You couldn't accept systematic violence because legal systems have developed peaceful mechanisms for conflict resolution. The psychological distance you felt from ancient religious practices reflects intellectual progress that freed human minds from supernatural explanations for natural phenomena. Your inability to navigate social hierarchies demonstrates democratic evolution that created institutions based on individual merit rather than birth circumstances. Your economic helplessness in ancient markets shows how modern systems have developed safety nets that prevent individual failure from becoming social catastrophe. Yet this journey also reveals something profound about human adaptability and the specific nature of progress itself. The ancient Greeks who would have watched you die weren't less intelligent, less creative, or less capable than modern humans. They were supremely adapted to their environment in ways that enabled remarkable achievements under conditions that would destroy most contemporary people. Those calloused hands that you lacked built the Parthenon. Those immune systems that could handle contaminated water belonged to minds that created philosophy, mathematics, and dramatic literature that still influences human thought. Those social networks that excluded you supported individuals who laid foundations for democracy, scientific inquiry, and artistic expression that define Western civilization. The ancient Greeks succeeded brilliantly at being ancient Greeks, just as you succeed at being a modern human. Neither success diminishes the other. They represent different solutions to different survival challenges across different historical moments. This recognition should inspire both humility and gratitude. Humility because your modern capabilities depend entirely on institutional and technological inheritance from countless previous generations who solved problems you've never faced. You didn't earn your soft hands through personal virtue, you inherited them through historical accident. Gratitude because that inheritance represents millions of individual lives spent solving problems, developing knowledge, and creating systems that make your comfortable existence possible. The ancient Athenian dying from dysentery contributed to medical knowledge through physicians' observations of disease patterns, even when those observations were filtered through incorrect theoretical frameworks. The craftsman developing repetitive stress injuries from pottery work contributed to eventual understanding of occupational health that protects modern workers. The families making impossible resource allocation decisions during winter contributed to social evolution that eventually created welfare systems. Your modern comfort stands on foundations built by people who endured hardships you cannot imagine, who solved problems you'll never face, and who made sacrifices that enabled progress you take for granted. The clean water flowing from your tap represents not just modern technology, but centuries of human struggle with waterborne diseases that killed millions before solutions were found. This historical perspective should also inspire appreciation for how fragile and precious modern achievements actually are. The institutions that protect you, legal systems, medical care, social safety nets, democratic governance, exist because people chose to create and maintain them across generations. They aren't natural features of human existence, but artificial constructions that require constant care and renewal. The technological systems that support your daily life depend on knowledge networks, supply chains, and social cooperation that could be disrupted by natural disasters, political breakdown, or economic collapse. Your journey to ancient Athens provides a glimpse of what human life looks like when those systems fail, and people must survive through individual capability and community connections alone. Understanding this fragility shouldn't create anxiety, but rather deeper appreciation for what humanity has achieved and stronger motivation to preserve and extend those achievements. Every generation faces choices about whether to maintain, improve, or abandon the institutional inheritance from previous generations. The ancient Greeks made choices that created philosophy, democracy, and scientific inquiry while accepting slavery, systematic violence, and gender oppression. Modern humans make choices that have eliminated many ancient hardships while creating new challenges around environmental sustainability, technological inequality, and global cooperation. Neither ancient nor modern choices represent perfect solutions to human challenges, but both demonstrate human capacity for adaptation, creativity, and social innovation that can address seemingly impossible problems through collective effort across extended time periods. As you return to your modern life, carry with you awareness of both the achievements that make your existence possible and the ongoing challenges that require contemporary solutions. The same human creativity that enabled ancient Greeks to create democracy and modern humans to create antibiotics continues to operate in current efforts to address climate change, poverty, disease, and social inequality. Your imaginary death in ancient Athens serves as a reminder of how much progress is possible when humans work together across generations to solve shared problems. Your comfortable return to modern life serves as inspiration for contributing to continued progress that future generations will inherit. The bridge between ancient and modern worlds isn't just temporal. It's built from accumulated human effort, creativity, and cooperation that transforms impossible survival challenges into manageable life conditions. That bridge continues to be built through individual contributions to collective knowledge, institutions, and social systems that benefit people not yet born. Sleep well in your modern bed, knowing that your comfort represents not personal achievement, but collective human success, spanning millennia. Dream of ancient Athens if you wish, but wake up grateful for the modern world that makes such dreaming safe, comfortable, and intellectually enriching rather than physically traumatic. The greatest honour you can give to both ancient sacrifice and modern inheritance is to live thoughtfully, contribute meaningfully, and appreciate deeply the remarkable historical moment that allows you to contemplate human progress from the security of achieved civilization. Your journey ends where it began, in the present moment that contains both ancient wisdom and modern capability, both historical tragedy and contemporary possibility. Rest now, and let that synthesis carry you into dreams that bridge all the worlds humans have created and all the worlds they might yet build. The ancient darkness has been conquered by modern light, but the human capacity for creating better conditions continues to illuminate paths toward futures we can barely imagine. Sleep is where all times meet peacefully, and from that meeting new possibilities emerge with each dawn. Sweet dreams, time traveller. You've earned them, and the world you wake up in has earned you.